6 children and 16 grandchildren. And the oldest one was always given to a father. I still call it Mother Spear. It was like, you do this and you do that. That was her role in life. Yeah. Maria was in charge. Yeah. She had to keep everybody in line. Yeah.
Like that. Everybody's coming back.
You going back to Boston today?
Yes, I am. I'm going to check with Ron.
Yeah, it's not too far away.
Right.
Good walk.
Right. Pleasure.
Nice meeting you. Thanks for all of what you've said today. It's been good.
We'll see you in the future, God willing.
In jail. Did you say that? Did you hear what I said?
Yes.
Okay. It's a challenge.
I've already called Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you again for being here. It's tremendous to have all of us meet and discuss important topics dealing with Jerusalem and Palestine and peace and moving forward and in a way changing challenges into opportunities. And it gives me great honor to welcome again to the podium Sir Ratib Rabia, who is the founder, president, and CEO of the Holy Land Christian Ecumenical Foundation, which is celebrating its 20th anniversary. And he will introduce our keynote speaker. Sir Ratib.
Good afternoon. I hope you had a good lunch. I am honored to introduce Dr. Abu Hajli because he was coming to the States and he changed his routes in order to come to Washington in order to be with us today. He's the president of Birzeit University. What surprised me that he's intellectual and he's scientist, because he was teaching chemistry, and he has the head of the chemistry. I mean, it's like, and that's something, because I'm introducing him because I don't like the intellectuals like Saliba. They think they know it all, and they just, look at us, who are you guys, but at least you have the science in your blood, and that's, we love you. Huh? Oh, yeah, okay, then we'll give you a break. Yes, Saliba's wife was students at the Birzeit University because with his department. Anyway, he is from Birzeit University. Birzeit University is ranked #1, in Palestine, and it is on the international level is well known. I'm sure you heard about it. It's not only the teaching; it is the place where is the resistance and of occupation. The school does a lot of things, beside teaching, because you go to. Is the guy here from Bethlehem? Okay, I'll not say anything about Bethlehem University. But, because he said good things, But, in Birzeit, they have, the students there, they come out as leaders, not only just, education. Anyway, that's what I like about Birzeit. And Birzeit is the best university, not because I'm from Birzeit too, just, this is another thing, just, because I'm from Birzeit, but I never went to Birzeit University, but I'm from Birzeit. Anyway, this is, if you need to know more about him, because this is impressive bio he has, you can read it in the booklet and know more about him. Without further ado, I would like to ask Dr. Abu Hajli to talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I promise not to fall asleep. We just arrived last night, and we got a little sleep, and I promise not to sleep in this afternoon, but I want to deliver my talk, my speech to you, dear colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor to be here today at the 20th HCEF International Conference on Jerusalem's Educational and Communal Development. Thank you, Mr. Rabia, for the invitation. I bring with me the love from home and the kinship that binds us together despite our forced partitions. When I read the theme of the conference on the question of Jerusalem and the role of Palestinians, Christians, and Muslims in advancing its educational, cultural, and social life, I was very excited to be part of it. We truly need to share perspective and insights to envision our path toward prosperous Palestine. The situation in Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza is a testament to years of iniquity and neglect. So, can we, amid the turmoils and instability we face, keep growing into strong, thriving societies? It starts with education. Education is the fuel that runs the engine. For a glimpse of importance of education for the prosperity of all communities, education is an integral part of United Nations 2030 agenda and a key enabler for it. The right to education is a fundamental human right as established in Article 26 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's encouraging to see that our government believes in 2030 agenda and is placing education and higher education as a key priority in their long-term strategic plan. Today, we have 14 Palestinian universities and 18 university colleges that offer bachelor degrees and diplomas. Higher education institutions have managed to thrive despite these turbulences. It is estimated that the gross enrollment rate for the age group from 18 to 24-year-olds is it's about 26%. These percentages are relatively high by the international standards, especially in comparison to other countries in the Middle East. Dear guests, we all have responsibility and play a critical role, not only in ongoing provision of quality education, but also in long-term development of Palestinian higher education. Since its inception by the women's rights activist Nabiha Nasser in 1924 as a small school for girls in Birzeit town, Birzeit University has been a thorn in the side of occupation, insisting on playing its role of enlightenment and creating multicultural Palestinian society inside its campus. During the 50s and the 60s, this girls' school became a college. The school became a college and then a university in 1972. Actually, students enrolled in Birzeit College at that time, during the 50s and the 60s, students used to gain 2 years. Then they used to go to the American University in Beirut and to get their bachelor degree by studying another 2 years and get their bachelor degree from the American University of Beirut. And we still have a very good relationship with the American University of Beirut. And many of our faculty actually graduated from AUB and got their, PhDs in Europe or somewhere else. Then Birzeit, as I said, as a college during the 50s and the 60s. Actually, many Arab used to come to Birzeit College at that time from Jordan, from the Gulf area, from Lebanon and Syria. And it was the only higher education institution at that time. In 1972, it became a university when the Nassers a Palestinian family, intellectuals and national figures donated some of their family land. The expansion required widening the existing facilities, including the classrooms, laboratories, housing, recreational and sport facilities, and the library. Efforts were undertaken to purchase land in the vicinity of the town, west of the old campus. The old campus used to be inside Nasser's family. I'm glad to have Musa. He is the son of the first president of the university, Dr. Hanna Nasser. I mean, they donated the land and they hosted the university in their homeland. I mean, inside the houses of the Nasser family before we built the new campus in the west of the old campus in Birzeit, while taking into consideration possible future expansion and development. This land is where the current facilities in the new campus are located. In the 70s, and despite the occupation, Birzeit became a university, blending Palestinians' values and Arab culture with an openness to the world culture. I remember Dr. Hanna Nasser, who was the first president of the university from 1972 to 2004, talking about his exile. He was also a victim of outrageous policies of Israelis. The university's board of trustees back then kept him in his post as a president of the university despite his exile. He opened an office in Amman, Jordan, which is the closest to the West Bank and Birzeit itself. He was able to obtain accreditation for Birzeit University and to get financial support to the students and the expansion of the university. The university offered a great opportunities for all segments of Palestinian society to access higher education, in particular, rural Palestinians and girls. The university campus has become a unique microcosm of Palestine, representing all layers of societies, rural, urban, rich and poor, male, female, conservatives and liberals, Christians and Muslims. These different groups has been able to gather in an atmosphere of freedom and respect for opinion of the other. This marks Birzeit University's uniqueness and originality. In fact, its strength and values were derived from its relation with society and from the spirit of rebellions that motivated it against all attempts to break people's will. The university was able to survive closures and Israelis' orders during its evolvement. Nevertheless, every year, Birzeit celebrates democracy, freedom of speech and expression in its annual student council election. The elections are a legacy that we are proud of. Every year, a day before polling, students hold long public debate on Birzeit campus with dominant issues including women's political participations and the general political scene in Palestine. Undoubtedly, the cruelest measures taken against the university community was the closure of universities, including Birzeit, by the military order for long periods. These actions deprived the students from engaging in their productive lives by delaying their graduations. The campus of the university was closed 15 times. The longest was between the first Intifada, it was closed for 4 years, from 1988 to 1992. the main campus was closed and the university has to function. We went to Ramallah, the town or the city next to Birzeit. We rented houses and apartments, and we kept teaching at that time. It was amid of a wave of closures of schools and education institutions. It's not only Birzeit, only some institutions and even high schools. And the Israelis considering the ones who teaches at that time is a crime, and they can be arrested because sometimes, one day I remember one of the Israeli soldiers, and he came while we are teaching, a classroom in one of the in one of the apartments or something like that, and he accused us of violating the order of closure of the university. He assumes that you are teaching outside the campus, and this is not allowed. At that time, it was amid of a wave of closure of schools and educational institutions. During this long closure, the university continued teaching in a secret by creating study groups outside the university. Since 2004, the university has been raided 11 times. Four of the break-ins occurring in the past 2 years. The last one was maybe a few months ago. They raided the campus and they kidnapped one of the students from inside the campus. And usually the Israeli military, they come during the night time where there are no students on campus and so. But in this, the last one raided the campus, it was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And maybe most of the students, they were outside the campus, but was in the unusual raid in the middle of the day instead of the middle of the night. Around 800 of university students had been arrested at one time. Among them, 16 female students. Currently, over 60 students are detained in Israeli prisons, many under administrative detentions with no charges. We have seen how in the past few months, our people living in area of Khan al-Ahmar, east of Jerusalem, are facing the threat of expulsion. Israel has been endeavoring to displace this community from settlement expansions, de facto annexation of the area, and bisecting the West Bank, cutting it into two. Among these people who are facing displacement are children, young boys and girls who have dreams and ambitions to fulfill. Our people in Jerusalem has always been targeted by the Israeli occupation. Do you think it's easy to cross military checkpoint every morning to be able to reach a school or a university? The checkpoints are set up on the way to the universities, not only for people from Jerusalem, but also between other cities such as in the north of the West Bank, Jenin, Nablus, and in the West Bank, Hebron. We at Birzeit University have around 30% of our student body are from Jerusalem. They have to cross the wall and the checkpoints every day, coming to university and going home in the afternoon. Unfortunately, Israel tries with all means to scatter us and hinder our development every day. The Israeli government has imposed a huge impediment on the freedom of movement of Palestinian students and academics, and on the movement of international academics working at Palestinian academic institutions, many of whom are of Palestinian origin and have family ties there. Some of them have been denied entry to the country or have had their visa renewal applications rejected by the Israeli authorities. We have 23 international, faculty members, Most of them are has a Palestinian origin. So far, they deny, some of them, they did not renew their entry visas. And those faculty members have been in Birzeit for over 10 years. One of the professors in history, he's an American, he has been in Birzeit for 35 years, and he has been deported the last month. We believe that in today's global academic environment of the 21st century, having an international diverse faculty has become a fundamental cornerstone of academic excellence at universities worldwide. If Birzeit and Palestinian higher education as a whole are denied the right to engage international faculty members, what is ultimately being denied in our right to deliver a quality standard of education that meets the accepted global norm? But amid the turbulences that we face as Palestinians, Birzeit University has managed to continue its mission in academia, research, and community engagement, and stand out. Our recent university ranking have taken turn to a better, for the better. In 2017, one of the international ranking, its QS ranking, ranked Birzeit. We, as a Birzeit University, enter the international ranking, featured the first Palestinian university. In its 2018 world ranking, as a Birzeit University outranked its national peers and broke into the top 3% of universities worldwide. This comes on the heels of the QS choosing Birzeit University as one of the leading 50 Arab universities for the third time this year. This is really what this celebration of students' academic excellence is all about. We are celebrating not only the fruits of academic excellence, but the creative and intellectual process that led up to them. And we are still working on several development, which make it easy to believe that these distinctions will continue. With 9 faculties, about over 100 academic programs, and more than 14,000 students, the university will continue in moving forward. We are now required more than ever to offer programs and initiatives that inspire the attitudes and the behavior of others to engage in a value-based and purpose-critical efforts in order to influence their communities and create changes. We at Birzeit University has taken notice of this, and we started to take action a few years ago. I will list here some of the actions we are taking. First, building on Birzeit University history of community service and earlier training programs, we started the Leadership and Active Citizenship Program, call it Masari, last year by seeking first-year students accepted for the academic year 2017-2018. It continues this year by welcoming a new and second-year undergraduate with a focus in empowering them to become active citizens and forward-looking leaders. The learning journey of Masari spans a period of 3 years, during which students complete 6 stations: personal competencies, career path, debating, citizenship, and social entrepreneurship. Training for each of the stations is delivered through 21 training hours. Second, we have recently launched Birzeit Business Hub, B-Hub, to address the problems of small enterprises and students' employability with the generous support from the European Union At the Business Hub, students will develop their skills and competencies, and small companies can build their capacities and get custom solutions to their specific problems or improving operations and grow. Third, we are also involved in building a Palestinian-Indian technopark based at Birzeit University, which serves as an integration between academia and business and provides state-of-the-art technology. The technopark will help in creating work, businesses, and other innovative opportunities for young Palestinians. 20 acres of Birzeit University campus grounds were donated to the park by the university's Board of Trustees, citing the park's proximity to academic research centers and an active students' body as catalyst for its future success. The park's location also benefits the students by providing jobs, training, and networking opportunities. The park strives to position itself as a leader for the Palestinian universities, an incubator of new technological startups, and a leading research and development center in various disciplines such as virtual reality, digital and media broadcast, renewable energy, robotics, and others. Fourth, and most recently, we inaugurated our 9th faculty, the Faculty of Art, Music, and Design, with a generous donation from a Palestinian businessman, Samira Weda. The faculty is artistic not only in its approach and structure, but also in its teaching methodology and emphasis on specialized skills and knowledge, experiential learning through studio culture and exposure locally and internationally. Dear guests, Palestinian universities has developed under abnormal circumstances. It is remarkable that they have grown quantitatively and qualitatively, even under such adverse conditions. We live in a time when knowledge is ever more vital to our societies and economics. In a world of rapidly circulating capital and people and of revolutionary developments, we especially hope that such academic initiatives as this conference will shed light on Palestinians' challenges and successes. We need to be united wherever we are in the world to work together for the world to hear our voices. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you for telling us a story about Birzeit and its development and its more recent challenges and the challenges of higher education and Palestine. To what degree have you benefited from solidarity support from the academic community around the world? I would think that most institutions of higher learning would be outraged with the treatment that Birzeit University and the Palestinian universities and colleges have received from the occupation forces.
Yes, I think, you know, your support, especially these days, to support our international faculties, to remain and to obtain the renewal of their visa and to stay in Palestine especially, and in Birzeit and other Palestinian universities. This is very important that the international communities should put pressure on the Israelis, military and the Israeli government to grant these international faculties the permits needed to stay in the Palestinian university, especially in Birzeit. We have the largest number of international faculty members, and these international, faculties will play. These faculties they play an important role in terms of internationalization of the education. This is very important for us and for our students, that they can, interact with international academicians. Like, they can hold conferences, for example. They make connections between the local Palestinian faculty members and the international community. Actually, we have academic support during the first Intifada and during Birzeit when was closed. Years during the 80s and the 70s, and the support of the international community at that time, it was essential for our students and our faculty, actually. And we wish that this support of international support of the education in Palestine will continue, that we can build up our higher institutions.
I have a question. My name is Saeed Erekat. I'm a Palestinian journalist. I have a two-part question.
Yes.
One, if you could share with us on funding, how do you go about funding at the university? What are your major sources for funding? And second, we know about the obstacles and the hindrance and so on of the occupation forces, but tell us about if there are any obstacles that are conducted by the Palestinian Authority. Thank you.
Obstacles conducted by the Palestinians, or that you said?
Yes, I'm saying that we know, we're all aware of what the Israelis do, but do you get help or hindrance, whatever, from the top?
Okay, let me say this. The funding, in terms of funding of the university, we are a private for non-profit institutions, which means that the students has to be the tuitions to the university. But not all of them. Actually, they pay the cost of the academic program. They only pay about 60% of the cost of their learning tuitions. Most, as I said, we don't have buildings in our budget. Our budget only includes salaries and running costs. The buildings of the campus are donated. As I said, about 30 buildings has been donated by mainly Palestinians in diaspora and local Palestinians. So we depend mainly in our students' tuitions and fees, and in some fundraising for the running cost of the university. The Palestinian Authority supposed to have some budget in their yearly budget for the higher educations. Actually, it's not much. Although it's not much money that they pay the university, but in the last few years, the Palestinian Authority almost paid nothing to the universities. And we mainly depend on ourselves in terms of fundraising and supporting our students. The government does not support much universities, most of the higher education in Palestine, which is like Birzeit University. It's a private for non-profit institutions. They do support the governmental universities. They have few governmental universities, but we are not. And most of the universities in the West Bank and Gaza are, in the situation like Birzeit. It's a public for non-profit or private for non-profit organizations or institutions. But all of our programs has to be accredited by the government. Although they don't support, but you know, you can't start any academic program without the accreditation of the higher education or the Ministry of Higher Education.
But you did not answer us on, you know, if the Palestinian Authority helps your operation or hinders your operation. You know, there's a
I said they did not help our operation, maybe. I don't know.
do you feel there is interference, let's say political interference by the authority or by the different political factions, by Fatah, other popular front, all of them? I mean, is there a great deal of interference by these groups in the operations of the university?
Well, I will tell you one thing. In Birzeit, we don't allow anybody to interfere in our academic life. But they do interfere, I mean, to be honest with you, but they do interfere in other universities, yes. But Birzeit, it has a special situation. We don't allow Fatah or Hamas or other factions to interfere, or even the government. And the elections is purely independent of any interference from outside, at least inside the campus. Outside the campus is something else, I don't know. But we want to assure you that Birzeit elections or Birzeit academic lives, nobody interfere in this, activities, including elections of students or academic activities on campus. But if you think or you hear that the government has interfered in some other places, maybe. But I represent Birzeit, I assure you they don't. Of course they do in some places, some other higher institutions, maybe. I hope yeah.
Anybody else has any question for Dr. Al-Hijri? See, we are not intellectuals. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Al-Hijri.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move to our next session. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the topic of East Jerusalem and the Palestinian religious tourism industry. As you might know, the Palestinian tourism industry in East Jerusalem faces unique challenges, including Israeli restrictions on new hotels and tourist companies, poor infrastructure, and high taxes. These are in addition to the seasonal nature of Christian and Muslim pilgrimages, the lack of proper coordination, and a common strategy among Palestinians working in tourism, and competition from the Israeli tourism sector. This panel will examine these and other challenges as well as the huge potential for growth. And now it gives me great pleasure to invite Mr. or Dr. Jad Daniel, who will introduce the panel and move with the program. Yeah, Dr. Daniel.
Good afternoon, or even ahead of time, huh? Can be bad. So when Ratib asked me to moderate this panel, I was thinking about this topic, and two things come to mind. One is the economical importance of tourism for the people, the Palestinians living in Jerusalem. But the other one is it's a way for us to really kind of introduce the world to our heritage in that part of the world, and also our ties to the land as we deal with a concerted effort to change the history, by the Zionist and State of Israel. So I thought this would be a very interesting topic to moderate and cover. And we have a panel of two distinguished people here. I just need to pull it was on my phone, and it will be here in a second. Two distinguished people on the panel, Sir Ratib Rabia. I think you all know him. I don't know if I need to do more introductions to Ratib. But I can tell you I've been part of the HCEF journey for 20 years, when Ratib, founded it and or co-founded it. And he started on that journey. And I know he has covered, multiple areas in trying to help the Palestinians living in Palestine. And, tourism has been one of them. So I believe he's well credentialed to cover the topic. I'm also pleased to welcome Mr. Marwan Ahmed. Mr. Ahmed is the founder and president of the Arab American Business Council since 2014. He is the president of Arabesque Media, a Virginia-based digital marketing and publishing company. Mr. Ahmed has a degree in computer information systems and additional education in digital marketing, TV producing, and nonprofit management. He has been in the marketing and publishing business since 1994. He served on a media training mission to Italy and the State Department, touring 4 cities to speak, educate, and train ethnic media. Mr. Ahmed specializes in general marketing, publishing for business in the US, as well as companies that do business in the Middle East. He is also the founder and organizer of Al-Quds Festival. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I will let you decide who goes first.
Do you have the presentation? Oh.
The pictures,
right. I been involving in tourism for Palestine since the inception of HCEF, where we thought that taking American Christians from churches to go to Palestine, because we felt this is the best way to know what's going on without any propaganda. We just take them there, and they seen the facts, like facts on the ground. Seeing is believing, and this is where HCEF built the volunteers based on the people who went and visited Palestine, and they moved. They moved because it is where find out that the Holy Land, the country of peace, Jerusalem, Bethlehem is under occupation, and that's felt that can't be. But again, they remember that 2,000 years ago, Jesus was refugees, and he has to run away to Egypt, and he has to come back, and the same story as the first Christian Palestinian. Again, still that it's continue to be like that. I'm just gonna shed some light fast on a couple of things about tourism and how we can change that, and did I turn it off, or I should? I think I made a mistake here. Okay, yeah, I'm back. Okay, Jerusalem, as you know, city of peace, holy city, you name it, Beit al-Maqdis, we call it different names, but still it is the holy place. Jerusalem, it is for Muslims, Christians, and Jews. We have a spiritual attachment to Jerusalem, regardless who we are. because Jerusalem, as we've been talking about it, should be shared by two people and three faces. Here is the Israeli policies toward Jerusalem. We outline it in three phases. From the point of view of tourism development and cultural advancement in the city. De-development is one thing, integration and gentrification. You know, all these, you know, the three section of the challenges, or these three challenges are affecting negatively on the people of Jerusalem. Let's talk about first phase is the development, de-development. As you know, this morning we covered a lot about the wall and you know, and separating Jerusalem from the West Bank. I'm talking about East Jerusalem as the Palestinians are divided. You know, who can come to Jerusalem and who cannot, and the wall is between them. You know, they are. You know, this wall is marginalizing the Palestinian presence. You know, urban presence in the city, and in a way that has done a little to improve. You know, like the government has a little to improve of East Jerusalem, and to protect the businesses or well-being of its residents. You know, this is the de-developments. That means there is no developments. There is no government to plan for East Jerusalem. It is on their own. You know, even it is because it's under occupation. Even they say we wanna have it as part of Jerusalem, the undivided, but they are really not taking care of it. And this is where the people, the Palestinians, left alone into that. You know, the second one, integration. What they call it, Israelization, or let me just go to that, of East Jerusalem, or Israelization. Maybe this is the best way to pronounce it, because Judaization of Jerusalem, this is what they are trying to do. They have changed everything, the zoning, the things is becoming, you know, an Israeli city. That's what they are trying to do, and to delete the Arab identity in Jerusalem. And this is what they are having, they are doing, you know, into that. Was that? Oh, okay. That's what we having this problem is where, you know, everything, even when they decided now it's the Arabic language is not an official language in Israel, and now they start changing the signs. Usually the signs is Arabic, English, and Hebrew, but now they are changing that to Hebrew and English. There is a lot of things, you know, they are doing in order to what do you call it, erase the Arab presence in any way. That's the second phase. The third phase is, which is gentrification. That's where they are emptying Jerusalem from the Palestinian people and bring Israelis, Jewish to live there, and this is affecting East Jerusalem. Of course, we talked, I don't want to talk much about the wall, because you know the effect the wall on the Palestinians, from instability of political instability, violence, low quality life. They are isolating Jerusalem from the West Bank, and you see Palestinians are different groups, you know, and you cannot visit Jerusalem unless if you have a permit, and you know, and the people in Jerusalem, they can visit the West Bank, but really they shouldn't, you know. I mean, it's too many difficulties, and to cross, you know, that area, it is unbelievable. It's like, you know, my staff, you know, because they cannot go they are in Bethlehem and in Berzit. If they want to connect between each other, they cannot go through Jerusalem. They have to go through the Palestinian roads, which take 1 hour and a half to 2 hours. It depends on the day or the time. And this is not helpful for, if you want to do tourism. Let's see here about quality of life in the old city. Unemployment 12%. This is an old statistics, and it's now more and more, by closing shops and no business, because of that. The people are living under the poverty line and still struggling. There is they are left alone. Even they think, when you talk to somebody from Jerusalem, they say, oh, they are doing well because, it's under the Israeli law. But really, it is the cost of living is very high. The income is low, and, they are hardly making it in Jerusalem. And they keep complaining and saying how we can support the Palestinians in East Jerusalem. And this is one of the issues, like I said, Israel is pressuring, its own exclusive plans in Jerusalem. They are making it a Jewish city, is not, city for all. This is what we have been talking for the last 2 days, and how we can work together to make it for all. And this is some of the things we are having. Even the maps, the things, it looks like, they want to change all the Palestinian landmark from Jerusalem to look like a completely Jewish city, and has nothing to do with Christians and with Muslims, And we are watching as the time is going by, and this is very dangerous, to look at Jerusalem, and it'll be sad to see it completely out of touch as Palestinian city. Of course, all of that affecting the tourism to Jerusalem. What is, like we say, in the Gulf area, the Arab Gulf area is the oil is where they make their money and where their economy depends on. In Palestine, it is the tourism, because this is where Israel taking the benefit out of it. More than 80% is covered by the Israelis. Even if they bring people to Bethlehem, they say, oh, Bethlehem is full of tourists, but nobody spends money, because they bring them in, they put them in the hotels, and they charge them only, they pay the hotel owners maybe $20, $22 per person per night, and maybe they are charging $100 for each, They cannot let them go shopping in Bethlehem, and this is, affecting the stores. It is in the Jerusalem same thing. There are many hotels are closing. You don't have that developments of hotels in order to absorb people coming. And this is sad. This is where we look at it. Talking about political issues, but this is where we need to give them support. As we say, we need, somebody say, what about Gaza? Yes, it's Gaza, Jerusalem, West Bank. We are all suffering. In different ways, we are all suffering. What could be done about that? This is where at HCEF we're trying to bring people and put them in Bethlehem, pay, the hotels what they deserve to be paid, and we take them on a trip to go journey beside Jerusalem and Bethlehem. We take them to Ramallah, to Berzit, to Sebastia, to Jenin, Nablus, and from there we go to Nazareth, to show them the Palestinian towns and cities, and break the bread, as we say in Christians, and I'm sure the Muslims think, to eat together, to understand it. I take them to Berzit. Now again, Berzit has another good as a destination for tourism, and this is, I'm not biased, but this is really what's happening when we take them, as you've seen in the video, that we take them to the social developments and cultural center, and they eat with them, and they dance with them, and they have fun with them, and they seen the real Palestinian people, because it's not a touristic area. They don't ask them, you know, if you are in Bethlehem, sell for me some crafts, or, you know, help me out. No, people in Berzet tell them the story. Tell the people when you go back what's going on with us. We are here and we are suffering. We are maintaining, you know, the presence of the people here. And especially we are addressing the Christians more. Here we are. We are going to be staying here. We've been here 2,000 years, and we're going to stay another 2,000 years. We are not, you know, we are going to keep stand fit in Berzet, and we are going to be in Palestine regardless what you are going to do for us. And this is the message where a lot of people, I'm sure some of you here will have comments been with us, and to talk about the highlight of here's some statistics. You know, you know, whatever I say, you know, it doesn't mean anything except I'm telling you it's going down. It's not helpful. You know, these charts, this is the number of rooms of hotels going down, the income is coming down. You know, it is really needs somebody to pay attention for it. In the Palestinian territories, we don't have a proper tourism, board of tourism, because of the situation, and that's if we fix this problem about tourism and starts focusing on it, we'll have a good income to the Palestinians. But still, this is not worked out because we don't have the system. We have families, have hotels, they have restaurants, but we don't have the marketing plan for tourism in Palestine. Regardless whatever I say, we have 2 million people coming for Bethlehem, coming more millions to East Jerusalem, but there is no money, there is no income. They just come and go. You know, how we can make them, you know, be staying there, spend money, understand the situation. The only thing we get about tourism or tourists to go there, or pilgrims we call them, is to know the real story about the Palestinians. Because wherever they go, they hear the story of the Palestinians. But this is where we need to encourage not only Americans or churches. Now we have, if you recall, that we have the Heritage Program. This is what starts for the Palestinian young people. Now we are organizing trips for the Palestinians who are uprooted, who don't have families in Palestine. And that's to come and visit, because a lot of them, the older generation, they want to go there, but they don't know how to do it. And now we're organizing these trips to take them to every city in most of the main cities that's been put it, and in Palestine, and let them visit and see, because, you know, I'm always hear that forget about the Palestinian too, because they have a role to play. They say, forget about Palestine. We lost it. We don't have anything there. No, you know. But when or some of our elders, they say, I want to go when is Palestine liberated. How can I liberate Palestine if you don't know what is Palestine? And this is what I'm asking them to come and visit and see. Is that correct, Najat? Najat is working with me on this project, and she's going to be with us, you know, to encourage them. You know, decline in everything. You know, just want to leave some question and answers after Marwan finish, because maybe that will cover a lot of things. But this is the full pictures, you know. In order to do some opportunities, we need to do a few things: preserve our Palestinian culture, identity, and existence in East Jerusalem. What we did, I just came back from BYU in Utah, and I put a museum there about the Palestinian heritage and culture to see that we are not terrorists, we have heritage and culture. You know, that's what, you know, I don't want to argue with you about what you talk about us, but I want to show you our good side. And you'll find out we are not as you call us terrorists. You know, we need to do more plans with East Jerusalem. You know, we need to empower it in order to keep it. We cannot just keep watching and talking, waiting for the political solution for it. It's not going to work this way. It has to go hand in hand. We have to have, I'm talking business-wise, but tourism is very important to work that as it's our topic. Capacity building of both individual, businesses, and organizations. This is important. You know, we cannot just, we keep focusing, you know, because the Israelis, of course, we have challenges with the Israelis. They don't give you permits to build. They don't let you do the business as you wish, and, you know, too many hardship for that. But this is the only way we have to keep resisting, by opening businesses, supporting businesses, capacity building in East Jerusalem. There is too, you know, the people there, you know, the youth are lost there, you know, and needs some training, leadership, and other things. There is a lot of things you could do with the people. You know, this is very important, that to work with them in the business, in the art, in the culture, to rebuild, to revive, you know, a lot of things in Jerusalem, because if you've been in Jerusalem before, you see it has a lot of things to offer. But the people, the Palestinian in East Jerusalem, cannot do it by themselves. And this is where the message to go. You know, if you are a Christian and you want to keep Jerusalem is for Christians, you need to involve. It's not good just to look at it as, you know, okay, will be solved later, or it's going to be fixed by itself. No, we need all to put our heads together in order to build it. Again, here is the promotion. We need to promote it. You know, we promote the Palestinian tourism, but we don't have a proper marketing plans or promotional plans, because we have people comes from Palestine. They want to promote the tourism. They don't market Palestine. They do sales. They do their own business, and which this is not helpful. First, you need to market Palestine, regardless who you go with, because that's benefit Palestine and benefit East Jerusalem. First, we need to do the promotion, you know, marketing. It is, you know, it is in college you take 101. You know, this is how you do it. You market it, then you sell. You know, you have to know the products before you buy it, and we don't do that. You know. And this is where we need to do more of that, and need to the international agencies to work on this. And I work with the WTO, you know, the World Tourism Organization, and we have a conference in Bethlehem about how can promote it. And then we brought them here to Washington in order to help us in how we can market it. But it is very difficult, because this is a big thing for an organization. It needs governments. It needs people to work on it in order to promote and market Palestine as destination for tourism. That's where, you know, still important tourism points here. The opportunities are there, and the Palestinian has challenges, but I think dealing with Palestinians, you'll enjoy their heritage and culture. They are very generous people, and they like you, and they will work with you, you know, as people, you know. But we need the international arena, beside, like FIDA is ambassador at United Nations working on the political issues. I wish I have here in Washington on that somebody work on tourism, just marketing tourism, and to focus on tourism, because this is our oil in Palestine. This is how we can make peace. People will understand it. All my volunteers, you know, around the country, we have up to different capacity, over 500 volunteers, but these are all because they found out what's going on. They have no clue. When they came back, and they are fully, you know, aware of Palestine, and they want to help. They want to help from the heart, not because, you know, they want to do business for the Palestinians, because this is the only way to understand it on all levels, business and politics. And we are asking, you know, all international agencies, governments, and all the good people in the world to come forward. It is fun to involve in tourism and to go to the Holy Land, and we can hold your hands, and we can pray together, and we can break the bread together and do everything we can do together and come back and build the tourism in Palestine. I'll stop here. I'll leave it till later for more questions. Thank you very much.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Ratib. I all on board with Ratib and his message about tourism. It is very important to us, and it's critical. It is our oil in Palestine. This is how we can make a wealthy society, you know, based on tourism. Not yet. No, I don't want to be famous now. So basically, my name is Marwan Ahmed. Thank you for the bio introduction earlier.
That's one.
Yes, we'll change hats now. So, assalamu alaikum. Hello, buongiorno, como estás? You cannot talk about tourism without speaking different languages, right? And I don't speak any of these, except English and some Arabic. I got involved in tourism passion just last year, and I visited Palestine in 2008, and since then I discovered by visiting how much it is lacking in educational tourism. So I decided to invite or encourage all my friends since that point on to visit Palestine for merely economic reasons, because I realized by visiting Palestine through tourism, we can support the hotels, the shops, the taxi driver, and the restaurants, and everything else would disseminate from there into the society. This is a very critical way of resistance, economic resistance, making the people of Palestine steadfast through economy. Not through politics, not through protest, not through angry mobs or any of that. It is through economic empowerment. And tourism is a perfect tool to do this. And it's about time that we take a lead in this. The Israelis have captured and monopolized this industry for many, many years. And we're just sitting and watching. And it's a no-brainer. Just take people to Palestine. And these people will spend money. And this money will go to the society. And the society will become more educated, more stronger, and will aspire to do better things. So I decided to put more effort into tourism as a business, not just as a nonprofit, because business will feed business. Nonprofit has charities, has its goal, it has its goals that will help certain segments of society, but we need to support business. That's the bottom line. So the status of tourism in Jerusalem today is very poor. And when I talk about poor, I am emphasizing Islamic tourism, because there are Jewish tourism, there's a lot of Christian tourism. Unfortunately, even the Christian tourism is one-sided, and I'm leaving it for Ratib and his organization to fix that. My side, I want to emphasize on Islamic tourism. Muslims have not been to Jerusalem, have not been to Palestine in the last decades. And it is sad. It's a sad situation that we have not. So I wanted to go out and invite American Muslim community and anybody else. This is not restricted to Muslims. Anybody else who want to come, visit Jerusalem. Because we wanted to empower the businesses of Jerusalem through tourism. The challenges are, number one, I mentioned already, the monopoly that Israel has on the tourism. They control this industry. But again, they don't stop people from visiting, so why not, take steps, be pioneers in this area as well. The other challenge in tourism is the lack of outside agents. Travel agencies outside Palestine, especially in the West, do not have programs to promote, to tell people, would you like to visit Palestine? Would you like to visit Jerusalem? I have links, I have connections, I can hook you up, I have packages for you, I have tour guides, I have hotels, I have everything you need to enjoy a trip to Jerusalem for whatever reason you want to go for. The other challenge is fear. People are just scared from going to Palestine or Jerusalem. They think they'll be stopped, they'll be questioned, maybe deported. because they have been in one protest, during their lifetime. These things, 99.9% don't happen. And the fraction of a percentage that this happens is to few people. So what? We will take the chance. I'm an activist. I've never been stopped visiting Palestine. Now, what are the services that we can empower in Palestine? There are Palestinian-owned hotels in Jerusalem, inside the old city and outside the old city. I don't have exact number, but I will give you a guide that will show you the numbers based on what the research they have done. These hotels, they start from 2-star hotel to maybe 4-star hotel. They're not a Western style hotels, but they're very accommodating, very friendly, and they will do everything they can to make your stay very pleasant. I visited some of these hotels. I talked to the owners, and I talked to managers, and I've seen how much they're hungry for us to visit them. They were so excited when I talked to them, and I said, I'm thinking to bring in a tour and a group to Jerusalem next summer, 2019. They're like, finally, it's about time. We get people here and there, but we don't have groups. We don't have any organized effort, and we're looking for people like you. And I'm hoping that whatever I do will be copied, and I will see more competitors trying to do the same thing, even if it's for a business reason. It doesn't have to be just for nonprofit or for just for a moral reason, but also for business. So hotels, transportation. A lot of drivers, whether bus or taxi drivers, are Palestinians in Jerusalem, and they will definitely benefit by using their services. Restaurants, tour guides. There's a whole industry that could be employed through tourism. And as I said, there are many other industries linked to it. Why do people visit Jerusalem? Most people think of Jerusalem as a religious place. Yes, they go for religious reasons. Whether Muslims, Christian, Jews, they go to visit their holy sites. But there are other aspects of traveling to Jerusalem. Leisure. It's a beautiful city. Shopping. There's all kinds of shops, handmade crafts, you name it. Everything is available, and at very reasonable and affordable prices. And the last one is youth tourism. And Ratib is a pioneer in that. He started this many years ago, and he's taken youth groups to Palestine and Jerusalem, and he's very good at it. And we will need more people to do the same thing. Not to compete with Ratib, but just think of taking youth, because that's how you plant the seed in these people. And the young people who will remember. And I remember, May, you mentioned yesterday your first trip and how it changed you, right? We need a lot of Mays to go. We need hundreds and thousands. We need a new Palestinian birthright to go to Palestine and Jerusalem especially, because it's beyond just a religious reason. It will reconnect them with their heritage.
Marwan, we take young people and young at heart. Don't worry.
So all ages, right?
All ages, yes.
Like heard that too, or another.
Absolutely.
Like that.
I'm personally passionate about maps and mapping cities, and I study the maps carefully. I'm not a scientist in that field in any way or form, but when I go to a place, I look for maps, and that's how much it tells me about the city and the diversity of the city and the services of the city. So when I went to Jerusalem this summer, I asked, where are the maps? And it took me a long time to find maps that represent our side. Believe it or not, they do exist. But it took me about 2.5 to 3 weeks to find a map. They're available, but they're hidden, they're put in drawers, and they're not shared, and I don't understand why. And I found few. So one of the maps is this one here. Has a lot of good information, but it could be improved. It's a good start. Graphically, it could be improved. The information is wealthy. We just have to improve on it. So I talked to these people to see how we can work on that. This map, I found actually a guide. It's a very wealthy guide of information, and it has a map also of Jerusalem. And it highlights the Islamic sites in Jerusalem, Al-Quds, Al-Aqsa, and the surrounding areas. Well, guess where I found it? I found it at Al-Aqsa Mosque Library. And I had to go through loopholes to find this map. From a guard to guard to guard to guard, who took me at the end to the library, introduced me to the library manager, who opened his drawer and he pulled this out and he said, "This is my last copy." Believe it or not. And it's very, very well put together, except it's not being delivered to people, to tourists, to people who visit. People don't know about it unless you ask. But you have to ask like 5 people before you find it, which is sad, actually. And this is produced by, actually, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. They actually produce it. But if it's not distributed, what's the point? Very good work, but it's not distributed. And we need to help them do that. This should be at every shop, at every gate, and every door of Jerusalem. Not because it's about Islamic sites, but it's because it's the history and the information it has. To my surprise, I found a very good resource also by also digging, going online and asking questions and asking people who introduce me to people until I find what I need. And also took me weeks to do that. And I had to spend 5 weeks in Jerusalem to find some of these resources. And I know there is a lot more than that. If I dig a little bit more, I can find. So I met this organization called Grassroot Jerusalem. I don't know how many people are familiar with it. And they produce this beautiful, beautiful guide. Has a lot of historical information, Islamic, Christian, about local organizations, about everything that has to do with the old city and its surrounding. A lot of resources, a lot of research has been put into this. And this is, I think, their 2nd or 3rd edition. And now they're working on 2019. Along with this guide, they produce a map. Another beautiful map. A lot of resources. Yet, it's not at every shop in Jerusalem. This map is the wealth, a true wealth of information about Jerusalem. And every resource and information you can think about from our perspective, not the other side's perspective. Why isn't this map at every corner in Jerusalem, given to every tourist, at every hotel, every bus driver, everybody who walks the street should have this map so they can look at it and learn. And I met these people. I went to their office and we chatted and I told them what I'm planning to do and they were very excited. And the good news is they are actually now, they have a digital copy of this map on their website and they're developing an app where you can download it in your phone and you can find all these resources and locations and anything you need through an app with a simple search. So, I have a question for you. How many of you have been to Jerusalem in the past? Very good. How many of you have been to Jerusalem in the last 5 years? Excellent. So I would say half of the people here. We need to take all of you to Jerusalem. We need to take your friends to Jerusalem. We need to take your neighbors to Jerusalem, your co-workers to Jerusalem. Because everybody loves Jerusalem, but they don't know how to start, where to start. And they end up at the travel agency who will guide them to an Israeli tour guide that will tell their story. Good for them, more power, they're doing their job. We're not. It's about time that we take initiative. And we cannot do this initiative individually, me and Ratib. This initiative has to come through every one of you. I talk to everybody I meet, Muslim, Christian, Jew, whatever, and I say, have you been to Jerusalem? And of course, most of the time they say no. And I say, okay, what if I take you to Jerusalem? Yes, I want to do business out of it, but that's not the only reason. I want to narrate my own story through the trip, not the other side's story. So I'm going to end with quick pictures of my last trip. Hopefully you enjoy them as much as I did. You could be there yourself next time. So I'm going to comment on a few of them as we go. This one? So, of course, everybody who gets to Jerusalem as a Muslim gets excited about Dome of the Rock. First thing I did, I stood there and I took a selfie. I sent it to everybody I know on Facebook and everything. So it's just exciting, and it's an icon, it's a landmark. And I think everybody recognizes this Dome of the Rock. Even Israel uses this icon in their tourism guides. Stuck. If I push harder, would it go? Okay. All right. So this is a panoramic picture of the inside of the Dome of the Rock. It's a beautiful architecture, of course, very old, and it is mesmerizing, actually. This is a night picture of Dome of the Rock. I did a little bit touch-ups on it just to make it look fancier. This is an event in Ramallah, actually, that was organized by the Ramallah Federation this last summer. And they had a Dabka group, was a lot of fun, actually. And they actually, I think, brought 1,200 people, mostly youth, from the US to this event, a conference. And that's what we need. This is a site in northern Palestine. It's called Ain al-Sukhna. It's a beautiful tourist attraction. And it's like you're not even in the Middle East. You're somewhere else. It's beautiful weather, swimming place. Of course, there are beaches in Palestine as well. This is a picture outside the gates of Jerusalem, entering the Christian quarter. This is the Christian quarter, I think. Beautiful site, beautiful place, a lot of shops, a lot of restaurants. This is inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, I think. This is inside the Mosque of Umar. It's a small mosque in Jerusalem. Hardly anybody visited. I mean, we went to pray there, and just were four people there. It's really sad, you know. This should be full of tourists, you know.
Can you go there if you're not Muslim, though?
Yes, yes.
You can't go to the Dome of the Rock.
Yes, you can actually.
Not inside.
There are designated times that you can go, and that's what I thought. That's what I thought. Now they have actually scheduled designated times for tourists to go to the Dome of the Rock. I don't know about
Not inside.
maybe not the mosque, but Dome of the Rock, I think you can.
Yeah, we were outside, but we couldn't go in.
I see. I'll work on that. Believe me, I will. This is the famous declaration of Umar bin Khattab when he did not allow the Muslims to pray in the Christian sites in Jerusalem, to preserve them. This picture is taken from the top of a hotel in Jerusalem. This hotel is I think, is a 4-star hotel. No, it is. I can't remember the name, but you can easily miss it by walking into the alleys of Jerusalem. But when you go in, it's really all marble inside, very well furnished. Has this rooftop where you can sit and have coffee or tea and enjoy the scenery. This is the inside of the hotel. I'm not promoting it, by the way, but this is just one of the. I'm not even saying the name, but this is what the services you're gonna get in Palestine, in Jerusalem. I think this is the Mount of Olives. Yes. I took this picture from the top of the wall. Yeah, from inside the Dome of the Rock wall. The famous Za'atar that when you walk in the alleys of Jerusalem. Old city, you'll see it there. This guy is on the phone, of course. Right. Probably on Facebook. The famous Damascus Gate. And you see now they have new posts for the soldiers. They built one for them. They used to hang out in the past. Now they have a station post. And that's how intimidating they are becoming. This is the inside of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And I'm going to go back one step here. And this is another sad reality. Time? Okay, you said 3 hours.
Yeah, after hours.
The sad reality is Muslims are not going to Jerusalem, period. And when I go to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and there are 4 rows praying, This is sad. This should be outflowing to the outside of the mosque. That's what the third holiest site in Islam should look like. And we need to change this for, again, business and tourist reasons, not just for religious reasons. And when I take a tour, I'm going to take the Muslims to the Christian sites too. And I'm going to walk them through the Jewish quarter and the Armenian quarter as well. To me, this is about educating people and introducing them and show them the beauty of the place from all perspectives. This is Armenian side. Yes. Is it? Yes. And Jaffa. Beit Lahem, beautiful, church. The Khalil, of course, military post around the Abrahamic mosque. A total, military post. And of course, you cannot go to Jerusalem without Arsus, the famous drink in Jerusalem. So thank you very much for listening. I'll take any questions. I'm sure Ratib has also things to say.
Anybody has any question or it's over? Okay.
Okay. I usually don't bring questions or comments, but I was very identified by your vision. And I remember when I came back from my KTH trip, the most precious thing I brought was a 90, almost 89-pound bag. And all of the things that I bought, the souvenirs, they were not important. Probably the two most important things was a huge map with all the roads of Bethlehem. And I remember we got it at a very Palestinian place, and they also had to, they handed up to us. And most of my delegate friends, they left those because they wouldn't fit in their bags. I found a way because my dad's very creative and kind of folded the edges, and I still have it. And yesterday we talked about art, and today through your photos, that is itself a way of art. My comment is oriented towards, it's not a question because I'm a thinker, not a doer. Long story short, Siratib, the fact that a Palestinian is banned from very sacred Palestinian sites, it's a statement, it's a truth statement, and truth has its own voice. So the fact that they cannot visit these sites on a daily basis should be marketed as such, as a reality. And the world needs to see that this is what's happening. Why should people consume this? Because it's the truth. And the more we go on applications or online places and we do virtual tours or we do things with a double message saying, this is what a Palestinian doesn't get to see every day, I think the broader audience we're going to get in terms of them seeing it for themselves. Because it would be lovely if we could all go to Jerusalem, but that, I even fear that the next time around I try to go in Palestine, they would not let me in because some of my fellow delegates had been denied that right. So my comment or my question is, what would it take for a digital movement, a tourism digital movement, to be put in place? Because the first thing I did when I came back from Palestine, I went on my iPhone and I tried to look for all of the Palestinian applications there were, and there were not many, but they're very valuable. And maps tell stories, photographs tell stories. How can we make this instead of paper-based movement, a digital-based movement?
I want to say something before, we are talking about when people are already there. This is easy to solve, and we'll put maps all over. But we need the maps are here. We need to get the people there first, because there are a lot of maps. Every travel agencies, if you go with them, they give you maps. The maps are there. How? We don't have the system. We need people to go there. This is what I'm concerned about. We need maps here in order to encourage them to go there. If they are there, whatever you do is beautiful, with map or without maps. Let's work on something, how to get you there.
So I think you had two issues. You raised two issues. One is the not being able to enter holy sites. And I'll tell you a story about that. My son and I were walking toward Al-Aqsa Mosque to pray evening prayer, and they stopped him. He's 23. And they asked him, "Are you a Muslim?" He said, "Yes." He's like, "Okay, read Al-Fatiha." Al-Fatiha is the opening of the Quran. He's like, "I'm not going to read Al-Fatiha. This is not kindergarten." He's like, "Well, you can't get in if you cannot read. If you're not going to read Al-Fatiha." So I intervened and I said, "What's the point? If you want to see his ID, his last name is Ahmed, and that most likely means he's Muslim." He's like, "Nope, he has to read Al-Fatiha." So it's like, talking down at us. So we refused, and he brought his supervisor, and we made a fuss out of it, but they wouldn't let us in. We had to walk around and go through a different gate. It's just a method of intimidating, basically. Now, to address the digital maps, I totally agree with you. We have to distribute these maps and the resources in them through digital media, through social media, websites, sharing, using all the latest technology, and it's available. It's a matter of sharing this technology. There is a gentleman here in Virginia that developed an app also for sites around Jerusalem. But he came up to me and said, "I worked 3 years on this. I spent $10,000 developing it, but I cannot market it." So we sat and discussed it, and I gave him some tips into how to do that.
I have a very short question. How well the tour guides are trained and how knowledgeable are they? Or they are just like a homegrown business, or there is a special training for them? Plus, I've been told that the Israeli guides, they kind of change the truth and the history when they take, foreign groups. So what's your answer to that?
From my experience, that they are well trained, but few of guards, tour guides. The thing here is they are well trained, but we need more of them. And if you have Christian groups, you have to ask for a Christian guide. If you have Muslims, you have to ask for Muslims. Otherwise, yes, they will rewrite your Christian history if you have with a Jewish guide, because I have that experience. When you go for the Orthodox, which is known the Orthodox here, if you go to the Holy Sepulchre, it is the most sacred place for the Orthodox. And the guy took these people over there to the Holy Sepulchre. They were cleaning it because between time and they were closing the doors. And the guy told the priest, the Orthodox priest, "Hey, nothing important here. Let's go somewhere else." They just went banana. I mean, you cannot. But your point, but that's why you need to fight for more Christian guides, for Muslim guides, because we don't have enough. But if you ask for whatever guide in any language, you'll find. It depends on the season, of course. Second thing, they are experts in archaeology or in history or what you want. You have different type of. Some of them they have PhD even, and that's what they do. Beside what other work they do.
I think you should address this. Bethlehem University has a program for tourism and tour guides. So if you have a Christian tour guide from Bethlehem or Muslim tour guide.
Just the problem is a lot of guides in Bethlehem, but they cannot go to Jerusalem or to Israel. This is a problem. It's not how we can get them.
40% of the students are from Jerusalem, so you have that 40%.
Yes.
I agree with Ratib, what he said about they're knowledgeable, but they're few. But there's another problem with tour guides. It's not only the knowledge. When the Israeli side take you to the old city, they kind of prevent tourists from buying things at Palestinian stores. They kind of rush them quickly to the shops and they just take a quick tour. And I'm going to take you to another place that's cheaper, has better quality, and they kind of put them in the corner to push them to go buy from their side, not the Palestinian, which impacts the economical situation of these shops.
Thank you both, Ratib, and I'm over here. Thank you both for the presentation. Just two quick questions. One of them, I don't know, maybe people in here watching TV on commercials, recently I've seen the Jerusalem-Israel commercial where they're trying to promote it, as Israel. what would it take for us to do something? Obviously, maybe not a commercial, but similar things where we put it out there in the mainstream. And then second of all, what about the issue of the Google Maps? I believe they've distorted names and stuff, right?
All the names of the places in the West Bank are linked to settlements.
Yeah, so.
And all the roads are primarily settler-only roads in the West Bank.
Let's answer his question.
It's part of that.
You know, the only problem now, I would like to focus on tourism. We don't want to go back to settlement. There is a lot of problems. I want to see how.
The villages is a real key point.
That's something else. I agree with you. You know, they changed the whole names. You know, I'm not here. You know, for settlements, walls. We need to see the positive, the hope, the good things. You know. Sorry, Julia. You and I. You know, always on that level.
No,
Yeah.
I know. No, it's not. We're saying the same thing. I'm not arguing
Yes.
that at all.
Can I ask
Just come to the microphone.
a question about the map?
Steve first.
Yeah.
Excuse me, let me just address the question about the map quickly. I mean, the promotion. It's very easy. You don't have to be on TV. YouTube advertisement is the cheapest in Google advertisement. It's the cheapest per click. And if people watch the commercial before the video and they don't click on it, you don't pay anything. It's not expensive. But you need, like Kratib said earlier, you need a campaign, you need a marketing plan. But also some budget. I'm not saying zero budget, but it could be done on a reasonable budget. Not millions, but it's doable. YouTube is the answer to what you're saying.
It needs government and institutional funding for marketing. We cannot just be naive about, you know, to do that as the Israelis do. When there's the low seasons, the Israelis, they have the Al Al airlines. They go for $1,000 for a week, include everything, because when you go there, they take your money on the other ways. We don't have that plans.
Ratab, I'm going to come at this. I don't know anything about the tourism industry other than when I'm a tourist. And the kind of things I look for, and I think people like me who are middle class and have some resources that can travel other than to family funerals, are one, is it a special place or a unique place? We don't have to talk about that. This is special and unique. It's got the Christian sites, it's got the Muslim sites, it's got that knocked, all right? Secondly, is it a place that's going to be safe and with little to no hassles? The safety thing is a perception thing right now with most of the people in the world. Yes, it's a misperception, but it's a perception that enters into the decision to travel somewhere. Some great island locations, or Mexico, can't go there now, or it's not safe now, right? Can't go to Cambodia. The third one is how accessible and easy is it to get around. So we almost know too much on that. The unsuspecting tourist probably doesn't know anything about it. We know about the checkpoints and I hear about all the stuff that's being shared here about the hassles. And I think lastly it gets to the issue, is it affordable and all that? My sense, it is affordable. But going back to your point, and that is the issue of what does it take to build a tourist sector. I just think you can do it by word of mouth, taking a small group, organizing it through a church. That works very well. But what I was hearing from you is a different vision for tourism where it becomes, it's actually almost too busy there. It's so successful. You see tourists there, like if you go to a major tourist area. And I think that you're going to have to be able to put the word out. You say Chamber of Commerce is not strong there on this.
We don't have.
No, don't have it. Government.
We don't have it.
See, the people you're competing against, whether it's for travel to Palestine, which I guess then it's is Israel, or some other place, they do have this. So there's going to have to be more out there, and it's going to have to address those areas as a tourist that I just told you about.
I can
Eventually word of mouth, but if you're building a whole sector, you know, is it unique? You got to really build the uniqueness, because it's like Machu Picchu, except it's more unique. And in the other areas, you have to address those very directly and get it in front of people. And then I think there starts to be a chance.
Let me just answer your question about security. Not the Israelis or the Palestinians like to see anything happening to the tourism because both they get benefit out of it. Never have any tourists for too many years been hurt or something happening unless if you yourself fell down on stairs or something. But for security, it's not. This is for sure. The other thing is that we have the business for the Holy Land, and it is there, you know, Israel, Palestine, a lot of tourists. But how we can bring them through the Palestinian tourism? This is the question. It's not how many people we need there. They are full. The hotels are full. Now, if you want to go around Easter, there is no room. You know, it's just how we can tell them, go with the Palestinian tourism. This is what we need to promote it. We cannot promote it, you know, bits and pieces. There is other way to penetrate that, which I'm trying, and it's very hard, but needs the clergy. Like I agreed with the Lutheran bishop that's to try to do the Lutheran tourism. With the Latin, the same thing, is how we can go directly to churches. We have to avoid the travel agents because our travel agents in Palestine, they can do all the arrangements for us.
And I think that's the point. Going directly to churches is a different strategy than going on television to appeal to tourists in general. And I do think you have one more special appeal beyond historic and religious. It's a human ecology and justice track.
Right.
And that's going to appeal with these righties like me, who've got a little bit of time, a little bit of money, and they recognize that this is a cause like South Africa or something else. I think that those are all fruitful, but I don't think you're going to see the big, you know, the big bazooka play at come to Hawaii, come to Bermuda. It won't be one of those kinds of deals.
Okay, thank you.
But just very quick, I've been 3 times, and the only time I haven't felt safe is when I'm around Israeli soldiers.
Yeah.
So, truly, I mean, I've always felt safe, and we always stay in Palestinian hotels. But in answer to your thing about Google Maps and tourism, while the professor was speaking, I just went to my Google Maps and tried to look up Birzeit University. Does not appear. It cannot be found on my phone app. As a tourism issue, that's huge. I mean, it's just not there.
I think the Palestinian tourism needs some help, needs to change the strategy, and needs to, you know, some money have to be spent on promoting tourism and market it, not to sell it. And our travel agents too, they are not really helping a lot in promoting our tourism. They are promoting their business, and this is 2 different things. You know, this is my opinion.
I think the key word now in tourism to Palestine is alternative tourism. And I may disagree a little bit with the Ratib here. The name of the game is business and money. If we go to travel agents and give them a good package with good incentive, they will promote it better than the other side. Because they want to benefit. End of the day, they want to make money. So we have to give them a package where they make the most out of it, or a little bit more than the other side. And believe it or not, they will start pushing, and they will push hard. And within our community, there are hundreds of travel agents around the country who will do this for us.
No, I've been trying. You cannot compete with the Israeli agents and give them packages. You cannot. I know.
I believe that.
But all the agents, the Israelis give good packages. The Palestinians don't have the good packages.
Okay, I think
just one thing about the Grassroots Jerusalem, which is grassrootsalquds.net. Do they not also provide locations of literally 200 or 300 Palestinian organizations that are doing things, every kind of thing, and so depending on what your particular interests are, you can go, hey, that would be great. You know, go over to this neighborhood, knock on the door, and meet some of the people who are really making Jerusalem, you know, stay alive. So that's something that can be done through them.
Absolutely, and that's why I'm talking to this organization. And they do have, like you said, all these organizations listed on their map and in their guide. So it's a wonderful resource.
So maybe we can continue discussion at the end. We started 7 minutes early and we just caught up. So we're back on track. We used that a 7-minute slack. Clearly it was a very popular topic. So Saliba, is it you coming up next? Steve?
Okay. Okay, thank you very much,
Thank you.
everyone.
That's right. Bring it home. Bring the family. Right there, she is.
Are we using the podium or sitting down?
It's up to you.
Okay, we can. It's easier to sit down here. Okay. Keep it.
One second.
Oops. Jim جاي ولا ما؟
Okay, last but not least, we have a terrific panel gathered here to discuss Jerusalem as key to Palestinian-Israeli peace. And as we know, peace negotiations between the Palestinians and Israel are at a standstill. A lot is going on behind the scenes, and even outrightly, such as recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, the moving of the Israeli embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, the stopping the funding to UNRWA, the closing down of the mission of the Palestinian Liberation Organization in Washington, D.C., and in my humble opinion, the deal of the century is being implemented without even announcing it in the first place. But we will see what's going to happen. So the questions are we at a dead end? How can peace be advanced? So this panel will present what it takes to reignite the peace flame. And I'm honored to be joined here by Mr. Khalil Jahshan, who is the Executive Director of Arab Center, Washington, D.C., Dr. James Zoghbi, who is President of the Arab American Institute, and Her Excellency Fida Abdelhadi Nasser, who is Ambassador, Deputy Permanent Observer of the State of Palestine to the United Nations. Each of the panelists will have 15 minutes, and once we go through the round, then we will open it to Q&A, and we will address as many questions as we can. We will conclude around 10 minutes to 5, give or take. Then we have a statement to read, which is a very short one-page statement to conclude the conference and move us forward into action. Thank you very much. So now I call upon, as is arranged in the program, Mr. Khalil Jahshan to give us his presentation for 15 minutes.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be here. And as a regular participant in HCEF annual conferences, it's good to see some of the old-timers here. I recognize some of the faces from last time. The title of our panel is Jerusalem Key to Palestinian-Israeli Peace. Let me say that, you know, in a way, probably when the organizers decided on that title, maybe the situation was slightly different. I do agree with the implication of the title that Jerusalem is key to Palestinian-Israeli peace. As a matter of fact, it's very central. And it reminds me of a video we did about 25 years ago in AAA in a previous incarnation called Jerusalem, a deal maker or a deal breaker. At the time, there was a very heated debate here in Washington about what to do with Jerusalem, and it's actually a sentence that I borrowed from Jim Baker at the time, who came up with that statement. However, as we all know, a lot of water have traveled under the bridge in recent months, particularly since the beginning of this year and particularly since the beginning of this administration. So I'm not sure whether we need to totally kind of dedicate. We will bring up the issue of Jerusalem. I know I will. But I'm not sure that the presentation or my presentation should be totally focused on, frankly, the centrality of Jerusalem, because it seems to me like at this time there is no even Palestine in the equation. So I don't know what the usefulness is of talking about Jerusalem as being central to a peace process when there is no peace process. There is nothing going on at this time on purpose. So peace talks between the Palestinians and the Israelis, as all of you know, are at a standstill. As a matter of fact, the whole, not just peace negotiations, but the whole situation in Palestine is right now at a standstill. Gaza, of course, remains under siege, a separate kind of entity in and of itself with its own basket of issues, which reminds me of the statement or the adage that Faiz Abu Rahmi, an organizer and at one point Attorney General in Gaza, used to say when he came to visit us here in Washington. He always began his presentations, particularly to Congress, by saying, "Welcome to the planet Gaza." And it is a planet, frankly, and it has, in and of itself, as if it's totally detached from mankind. And it's surrealistic to continue to see these developments going on and on. But Gaza remains under siege. The Great March of Return, as it is dubbed, is continuing. Since March, more than 210 people have died, mostly young people, most of them shot to death by Israeli snipers. About 18,000 people have been injured and maimed. To be exact, 17,259 as of this week. At the same time, I think to put things in context, let me say that the Palestine problem, as far as I'm concerned, as a person of Palestinian origin, who actually has his whole life kind of began with this Palestine problem. I was, 5 days old in 1948 when Israel was declared as an independent state. And I lived through high school there and witnessed some of these events, and then came to the States in the late 60s. But as a student of the Middle East, as a student of the Palestine problem, as a student of the Arab-Israeli issue for the past 50 years, I can tell you that with a clear conscience, that this phase right now that we are witnessing today is probably the most critical, the worst juncture in Arab-Israeli affairs, and particularly in Palestinian affairs. We are all familiar with the economic difficulties. You have discussed some of that today. The political difficulties that have been faced by Palestinians throughout the years, internal and external wars, almost civil wars. They were not civil, but they call them civil wars, between Palestinian groups over the years, external wars between different host countries and the Palestinians. Yet, when you look at all these phases between 1948 and I would say this time, some hope did exist in the past. Maybe misplaced hope, maybe exaggerated hope, but there was always an element of hope in the sense that Palestinians, at least, and I'm trying to kind of reflect today their sentiment the best I could, they had some hope that there is some kind of a solution down the road somewhere, somehow. And yet today, you're not going to find very many Palestinians in Palestine that adhere to that today. It's in addition to the fact that it's being the worst period in the history of this conflict, It's the total, almost total absence of hope that is so depressing and worrisome. Today, if I were to call this, I mean, you know, I have different, over the years in my presentations, I keep calling these stages in Palestinian history different funny names so that students, when I used to teach, and people in the audience can retain what I'm trying to say. So the first period, 1948 to the 60s, I used to call the ET phase of the Palestine conflict, the I want to go home phase, okay? So people can, you know, remembered that for a while. This one, I would say, is the liquidation stage of the Palestinian conflict. You know this term, liquidation? Those of you who are of Palestinian origin probably grew up knowing that, and other people who are well versed into the dictionary of Arab-Israeli conflict are familiar with the term, but Palestinian leaders have milked this term to death. I remember it as a kid, didn't know what it was, but we all kept repeating it as little kids because we heard politicians all the time, liquidation, liquidation, تصفية القضية الفلسطينية, the liquidation of the Palestinian cause. They used it, of course, for different reasons. They used it you know, as the opiate of the masses, if you will, to control, to govern, to influence people, and mostly, as of course we're familiar in this town with this tactic called scare tactic. You know, these people that are about to invade our country from the south, the liquidation of the Palestine cause was used. So some people invented fake news and scare tactics long time before this Trump guy showed up on the scene. In my analysis, I would say there are four major contributing factors. There are more, but four major ones for the purpose of our discussion and limited time frame that I would like to dwell on. First, I would say let's start with cleaning house first. The Palestinian crisis of leadership right now is the main factor internally. By that, I mean that today there is no public trust in the current Palestinian leadership, like it or not. Mr. Abbas is a good friend. I've known him for years. I've dealt with him long before he became a politician, and dealt with him for more than 30 years. He has done some things right, some things wrong, but the fact of the matter today, as we speak, 60% of the public in Palestine think that he should resign. This is the last public opinion survey conducted in Palestine. The leadership in general, not just personal Abbas, but the leadership in general seems to be lacking in a political strategy. It doesn't seem to have a sense of direction. There is no national unity. These two parties are kind of locked in a hug of death, Fatah and Hamas, to the detriment of the Palestinian national interest. I could care less who's right and who's wrong as a person of Palestinian origin that lives in the diaspora, if you will, who immigrated to this country, but it bothers me that they don't seem to be putting the national interest of Palestinians and the future of Palestine ahead of their public differences in terms of who wants to rule. And clearly, one is incapable of governing and the other one is incapable of playing a loyal democratic opposition. There is no political initiative right now in Palestine. You look at this detriment, at this cul-de-sac that we find ourselves in as Palestinians, the leadership is not presenting a way out of this predicament. Two, on the Arab side, let's kind of move a little bit to the macro. The Arab collective abdication today from the Arab-Israeli conflict is a major factor affecting the situation. This quick resignation, one after the other. Who do you blame? Frankly, again, I will start with the Palestinians. If it weren't for that period in the Palestinian struggle, where we kept talking about the Palestinian independent decision-making, most people took it innocently as something good that Palestinians should have. That pushed the Arabs out of the equation. That began way back in the 70s and 80s. But now the Palestinians are paying the heavy price. It is not at the mass level, but it is at the government level. Why do I say that? The last public opinion survey we have conducted at the Arab Center, we do annual surveys called Arab Index, Arab Opinion Index. We actually interview, our database is about 18,000 people. We This year we did it in 11 countries, including, by the way, Saudi Arabia. And in that survey, 80% of the respondents, 18,000 of them, said that the Palestine question is not the property of the Palestinians. It is an Arab issue. It's my issue. They picked that as their answer. 85%, 5 more, in all these 11 countries, the average, the highest, was actually in Tunisia. The second highest was in Saudi Arabia. 85% on average said that no to normalization. No to normalization. Yet we have these countries, rulers, stepping on their own public opinion, not taking into consideration their own public opinions, carrying to meet and even with the worst of the worst, Netanyahu and others. I mean, I could see some Israelis that an Arab would like to meet with, but there is a limit, as they say in Hebrew, yesh gvul. There is a limit to insanity. And I don't understand what's happening with this. But Palestine today is no longer on the common agenda of the Arabs. The name Palestine, unfortunately, is becoming a dirty word in some sectors of the Arab countries. I tweeted just 48 hours ago, a tweet making a suggestion, not necessarily attacking somebody or criticizing anybody, making a suggestion that this crazy meeting that just took place between the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and this group described as evangelical Christian leaders from the United States, who are neither evangelical nor Christian as far as I'm concerned, nor leaders for that matter. And I criticized the meeting as somebody should have cleared that group. Somebody should have vetted that group. It's embarrassing. And you should see the attacks. Somebody unleashed about 600-700 with the same message. People attacking me for being a dirty Palestinian. I should go fight for my people. I have sold my national rights to Palestine to be an American, and on and on and on. Same messages again and again and again. Somebody is directing that from above, but that's basically the current state of Arab affairs as far as Palestine is concerned right now. The third one is the lack of Israeli leadership at this time. Not that leadership in Israel have been forthcoming all along. I mean, I've lived there during periods where there were leaders that were viewed positively in this country, but they were not necessarily viewed equally positively by the Palestinians. But there was some give and take for a while. Now there is no give and there is no take. There is a leadership in Israel that's morally and politically bankrupt, that doesn't believe in any form of arrangement with the Palestinian people at all, zero. And they hide behind statements like, we have no partners on the other side. Well, you create partners on the other, especially when you are the strong party to a conflict. You accommodate, you make, by meeting people halfway, you create leadership on the other side. Second is the radicalization of Israeli society. Israeli society is not what it used to be last year. It is not what it used to be 10 years ago. It's not what it used to be certainly 40 years ago when I left there. It was totally different. Today, there are very few believers in a negotiated, peaceful political settlement between the two parties in Israel. The political bankruptcy of the opposition has been very, very clear, very significant. I don't want to offend my friend Jim by saying it reminds me of some of the moral bankruptcy on the part of our Democratic friends in this town to see how labor disintegrated, but Jim would agree that there is some bankruptcy there that he has been advocating all along and criticizing moral. The other one is the U.S.-Palestinian relationship. With all due respect to the current administration, I think this administration has essentially declared war on the Palestinian people. It started with maybe the PA, went to the PLO, went to Hamas. There are different aspects, but frankly, today, the Palestinian people have become the target, the enemy. Just like the media are the enemy of the people, for this president in the Middle East, the Palestinian people are the enemy of the people as far as this administration is concerned. The policy seems to be managed by inexperienced and unqualified team. I say that because there are some former diplomats in the audience who know what I'm talking about. This team is clearly opposed to the concept of two states. It's clearly opposed to independent Palestinian statehood. It's clearly opposed to any compromise on Jerusalem. It's clearly opposed to any compromise on settlements. And basically, it's opposed to the conventional wisdom that emerged from many, many years of attempts at peacemaking in the Middle East. These attempts, we all know, failed for all kinds of objective and subjective reasons. But frankly, their only success, little tiny success, was the fact that they created a conventional wisdom, some sort of parameters that everybody who's an expert on the region knows if you want to have peace, you need to do 1, 2, 3. This crowd doesn't believe in the 1, 2, 3 that need to be followed if we are to resolve this conflict. The ultimate deal they promised us is nowhere to be seen. We don't even know yet. They've been talking about it for 2 years. There is no deal and there is no ultimate. There is just nonsense. And it hasn't materialized. You know, their actions speak louder than their words. What they did on Jerusalem, what they did on UNRWA, what they did on the right of return, what they did on the refugees, what they did on the closure of the PLO office, what they did on cutting U.S. Economic aid to the Palestinians, what they did on cutting U.S. humanitarian aid for hospitals, damn it, is unforgivable and intolerable. So, and to add insult to injury, they just also took the consulate that historically has stood for as a gesture to the Palestinian people in Jerusalem and put it under Mr. Friedman's control at the newly established U.S. embassy in Jerusalem. Meanwhile, the Palestinians unfortunately continue to play defense. Nothing urgently right now or seriously kind of visible in terms of their strategy. And what they are doing is also not just in Israel and in the US and in the Arab world, but the Palestinian leadership is also guilty of ignoring Palestinian public opinion, which I'd love to discuss a little bit more during the Q&A. Thank you for your attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You covered the field. And and some of the points I was going to make were there. I wouldn't disagree with anything you said, and I don't want to repeat what you've said. So I think I would try to focus on a couple of issues that you hadn't spoken of. The first is this issue of what appears to be creeping normalization. A minister here, a Netanyahu there, etc.
Volleyball team.
Could you define that? I didn't really know that. What do you mean by normalization?
Effort to turn the Arab peace initiative upside down, to recognize Israel and make it a normal country in the region before it does any of the things that were required of it to do so. Just a couple observations about that. The one is this administration is putting enormous pressure on people to do it. One of the lures is that it will be helpful to help defeat Iran or to isolate Iran. And the second is that if Israel feels more secure, this is an argument that goes back to the very beginning. If Israel feels more secure, they'll be more accommodating to make compromises. With regard to the first, we've actually polled on that, Khalil, in a very direct way. We've said the question, we've said people have suggested, policymakers have suggested that the Arab states should join with Iran to confront, join with the Arab states to confront Iran and extremist Islamic movements. And we gave three options. One was it's a good idea if Israel agrees to
fulfill the terms of the Arab Peace Initiative. The second was that even if Israel does fulfill the terms of the Arab Peace Initiative, we shouldn't do it. And the third was we shouldn't do it whether they do or they don't agree. About 1 or 2% thought it was a good idea, period, depending on the country. And so there is simply no tolerance for it. And while people here get confused by, I mean, policymakers in Washington never learn to distinguish between sycophancy and reality. So, you know, if you're the subordinate, as most Arab leaders feel they're the subordinate, they'll say anything to the master, who they perceive to be the master, to get their way or to court them. American policymakers never learn to distinguish between the two. So, oh yes, they're really very willing to do this. They really want to do this. Nonsense. The best gift you could give to Iran right now and any extremist group would be to have an overt relationship with Israel. And so that simply isn't going to happen. And secondly, with regard to the normalization, bringing us closer to peace, making Israel more accommodating, that's also nonsense. I mean, Israel has a practice of demanding concessions on the basis that it'll make us more willing to compromise, pocketing the concession, and then going on their merry way and then asking for yet more concessions. Just two experiences I had directly. One was before Madrid. There was this push, as you recall, to have Arabs end the secondary boycott and the exchange that Baker promised that they would do a freeze on settlements. He'll get Israel to do that. And that deal was done. The secondary boycott ended and the freeze was announced. I went leading a delegation of Builders for Peace, this group that Vice President Gore started right after Oslo. We took a delegation there in early '94, and as we were driving past Tel Aviv, a couple of the Jewish businessmen who hadn't been there in a few years were marveling at the lights on the buildings. There was Sanyo and Samsung, and they said, my God, none of these things were here. The peace process is really paying off. Sure, it was, because the secondary boycott ended and these companies that hadn't done business were now there. The next day we were driving north from Jerusalem toward Ramallah, and we were passing construction site after construction site on hill after hill after hill. They said there was no settlement expansion. One of the Jewish guys on the trip said, oh, but the Israelis have assured us this is an expansion, this is just natural growth. Natural growth on the next damn hill, natural growth, right? So the boycott ended, the secondary boycott ended, but the settlements never ended. I went to the Casablanca Summit, which was again one of the sweeteners to make peace possible in late '94. And when we got there, the Israelis were like kids at a carnival. I mean, it was like they were obviously so thrilled to be in an Arab country, and anybody dressed in a thawb, this was pre-selfie, but it was like they'd line up and another one to take a picture. I mean, they were sending home pictures. Here we are with the Arabs, and it's great. And I chaired a session on the Palestinian economy, and it was a great discussion. It went wonderfully in terms of the issues that were discussed with the various Palestinian ministers. The follow-up to that was the next year in Amman, and I was to chair a session there, but it didn't work because while Israeli leaders were there and government people from the Palestinian Authority were there and Americans were there, and the business community from Israel and business leaders from around the Arab world were there were no Palestinian businessmen because Israel closed the border and would not allow the Palestinians to cross. They wouldn't give them permits to cross. It was as if the Palestinians had opened the door to the Arab world by signing Oslo, and the Israelis went through and closed the door after them. I got mad and pushed back that we had to have some meetings with Palestinian business leaders, so we moved the meeting to Jerusalem. We were at the consulate. We had with us Yossi Beilin and a few of the other Israelis were there. We had folks from the embassy, and we had American business leaders, and we had Israeli business leaders. There were no Palestinians. The guy sitting next to me from the consulate said, passed me a note, he said, damn, Arafat probably won't let him in. He won't let them come. Literally within 5 minutes after he gave me that note, we got a phone call from one of the Palestinians, the head of the chamber in Ramallah, saying, we are at the checkpoint and we can't get in. The Israelis won't let us through. Again, an example that the sweeteners are pocketed, and then they move on to the next one. They simply don't work. So if, number one, anyone thinks that an Arab alliance with Israel to confront Iran is actually going to happen, not. And two, it actually would give Iran a talking point that they would use quite vigorously. Because we call it, we found our same thing in the polling in terms of Arab attitudes, we call it the hole in the heart, the wound in the heart that never healed in the Arab world. And while in different periods of time you can do polling, when Palestine is quiet and Syria is exploding, sure, you'll get Syria is really on my mind more than anything. But when there is trouble in Palestine, every Arab pays attention. And it's just, it simply is not ever going to go away as an issue in terms of being central to Arab concerns. Now, given that, and given the reality of where we are now that I think Khalil describes perfectly, we have tough choices that we have to make. And I don't think that they're actually choices that trouble me so much as they sort of provoke me to want to think new thoughts. We keep hearing, if this happens, it's the end of the peace process. Or, you know, I mean, the issue of the two-state solution here in America has become a mantra that politicians use to absolve themselves from doing anything. Oh, no, I support the two-state solution. Meanwhile, there is no two-state solution, and everything you're doing is making that possibility less likely. For years, I had to confront this issue of two states or one state, and I would say, it is not up to me to subject or to impose my feeling on people and say, you have to suffer for another century because I'm going to say one state as opposed to two states. The easiest, the shortest, the quickest way to provide rights was separate people and be done with it. I've come to the conclusion that that is never going to happen. That if you look at the realities on the ground, they are very clear. If with a lot of show and hoopla, Israel had to expend enormous energy to get 5,000 punks out of Gaza, and remember the settlers themselves had left, and these were the kids who were kind of acting out. The number of those acting out in the West Bank are even greater. Take a look at daily reports of settler violence and settler harassment of Palestinians. And think about what it would take to move. I mean, people say, well, it's only, you have to move only about 80 to 200,000 of the 600,000 that are there. You have to figure out which Israel. See, from the very beginning, the Israelis insisted Palestinians have a civil war to deal with their extreme. Israel never wanted to confront its own extremes and have its own civil war. And there's no way to find an Israeli government willing to do it now. Nor is there a chance, even every time I look at polls and look at the situation in Israel, there's no way you get to 61 in terms of a Knesset membership that is going to be accommodating toward peace. And even if you got to 61, there's no way you get to 61 without an Arab bloc. And as Rabin found, with an Arab bloc, with the Arab members of the Knesset being as part of your majority, there's no way you have the authority over the 59 that will allow you to take the steps necessary to evacuate settlements or to move the wall or to do the things to make the tough choices that we have to make. Tough choices only because you got yourself into that hole in the first place. The reality is that we have a one state. There is one state right now. It is an apartheid state. There is no human rights, no equality, no justice for the majority of the population who live between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. Period. Period. Whatever you call it, it is a fact that there is no two-state possible. I don't see it coming. If you look at the maps, I remember one time I was in the office with Aaron David Miller during this period when I was working on builders, and they just finished creating the new maps. And there were all these little circles. And he said, all that's got to happen now is these circles all got to get connected. And then there's a state. And I said, Aaron, what if it is by design that they're little circles and they'll never get connected? Oh, no, 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 no. I did my dissertation on the Arab population in Israel from 48 to 67. The strategy was very clear. You took the land, because Arabs in Palestine, unlike other parts of the Mediterranean, instead of having individual ownership, they have collective ownership. People lived in a village and owned the land around the village and farmed it collectively. So the Israeli strategy was you pocket them in the village and you take the land around the village. Strangling growth, denying, they created was a concept that was novel in Israeli anthropology. It was you created landless peasants. They had the value system of peasants but without land, and therefore they became landlocked and became dependent on day labor jobs in Israel because they could no longer do the farming that they'd done. When you look at Area C and you look at the roads that have been built, the design was twofold. One was to make sure, as the Drobel's plan said in the 1970s, that there would never be a possibility of a contiguous Palestinian state. That was by design. The second is, by taking the land and denying the natural growth of the indigenous people to ensure the natural growth of the settler population, you made sure that there would not only be no contiguity, but there would also be an impoverished Palestinian people. When we were doing Builders for Peace, working with the World Bank, the idea was how to create an indigenous economy. We concluded a couple of things. One was that you could not build an indigenous economy unless you could import and export the absence of raw materials. The second is you couldn't do it unless you could build economies of scale within. But if you're having a factory in Hebron and you can't market easily in Ramallah or go to Nablus, then you can't even you have little small competing factories in each town without being able to create even a domestic market, no less an external market. That being the case, we have to confront the reality. And that, I think, opens some exciting possibilities for conversation. And I mean it without depression. I think that there's the need here to say, it's one state, it's an apartheid state. What is our strategy moving forward to secure justice, equality, and human rights? It opens new possibilities of struggle, new possibilities of even identifying problems, and new ideas of how we think together to move this situation forward. BDS, obviously, is one tool, an important tool. It means we have to fight like hell against Congress. It means we have to fight like hell against state legislatures. It means we have to do what the ACLU is doing with several other groups around the country and fighting the legality of that. We also have to encourage more and more churches and businesses to take those measures themselves. But we also have to have a strategy within Palestine and support those in Palestine who are arguing for and making the case for the principle of human rights, equality, and justice being paramount instead of negotiations for peace. I think that given what the Palestinian Authority has done to date, and the most significant thing is I was with Riyadh last night. Palestine is the chair of the group of 77. Yeah. That's huge. That's huge. Should never be overlooked. It's almost as if the Palestinians can see themselves back where they were at the time of the Bandung Conference, as a leadership, playing a leadership role in but they have to change the argument of what they're calling for from two states and negotiations, separation and negotiations, to what Mandela did, which is argue for equality, justice, and human rights. A transformation of the very struggle to a whole new level. And I will stop there.
Thank you very much. Let's hear now from Her Excellency Fida Abdelhadi Nasser.
Thank you, and I am most honored to join such distinguished presenters, Dr. Jackshan and Dr. Zoghbi. No, from when I began long ago in the early 90s, they were legends, and they have persevered through today. So it is an honor for me as we gather to consider the many challenges that are facing the just cause of Palestine at this moment, and it is an existential moment, as Dr. Jahshan pointed out, in any way that we examine the issue. The question that was posed to our panel was, how can we reignite the peace flame? So I always go well prepared, so bear with me, because this is what I would try to address. But there are a lot of convergences. And so against this backdrop of an ever-deteriorating political, humanitarian, socioeconomic, and security situation, and a deepening human rights and protection crisis in occupied Palestine, it's obviously very difficult to feel optimistic or to even imagine what could possibly reignite the peace flame. And perhaps this diminishing belief that a just peace is within our reach is one of the biggest obstacles that we face today. How can peace be made if people no longer believe in its promise, and if there is no credible horizon to achieve it? If it's only proven over and over that justice is unattainable, that impunity reigns, then the cynicism and despair that we see all around us are only going to become more formidable obstacles on the path to peace. So restoring hope and conviction among the Palestinian people and those who support them in the possibility of justice and peace, I believe, must therefore be among our main priorities. So this requires several urgent steps. And of course, without dwelling too much on it, it requires an immediate effort to alleviate the dire situation on the ground, bolstering the resilience of the Palestinian people. And this was addressed as to the importance of the people, not just the sites, the living stones in Palestine. After half a century of Israeli occupation and 70 years of an ongoing Nakba, the hopes of our people have not just been depleted, but their coping capacities. And the coping capacities that have been at the core of their legendary steadfastness. And this is reflected in the distress that we witness in Jerusalem, in Gaza, in Bethlehem, in Al-Khalil, all across occupied Palestine, and in our refugee communities across the region. And so I do believe that enhanced humanitarian action is vital to meet human needs, but it's also essential for restoring hopes that a better future, a free future, is possible. At the same time, and I think this is where we will converge, I think that we need to act to reinforce rights as the foundation of our cause and the source of its justice and strength. Among ourselves and in our outreach to others, we need to foster deeper understanding of our rights in accordance with international law. So just as we would wish for our youth to know their heritage, for example, we must ensure that they know their rights. This is critical for shifting the conversation and focus in this country in particular to a more rights, law-based approach to Palestine towards rectifying biased and harmful policies and ultimately advancing our struggle for freedom. Regrettably, the facts and legitimacy of our rights have been lost here in the US, as Israel and its lobby have managed to create so much toxicity around our issue. If you just look at any presidential debate or congressional legislation on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, we spend an inordinate amount of time pushing back against the propaganda that the issue is about terrorism or that this is a religious conflict. There's little space for religion as a force for social good to shape moral and humane decision-making, and instead it's being exploited by extremists, Israeli extremists, but also their Christian evangelical Zionist supporters, used as a pretext to justify Israel's violations, its claims of insecurity, anti-Semitism, where it's persuaded policymakers that it is under a constant security threat of Palestinians, casting the very same people it occupies and oppresses as terrorists, with even children and peaceful protesters dehumanized. So of course, I mean, yes, religion is a factor in the conflict. Yes, there is violence and terror are symptoms of the conflict, not its cause. But we cannot accept that that we allow unchallenged the premise that Palestinian rights that support for Palestinian rights be equated with anti-Semitism, or accept that political, legal, or nonviolent popular resistance to the occupation and criticism of Israel's crimes be equated with terror. The facts have to be established. This is about a people seeking their freedom in their homeland. This is a political, territorial, human rights issues. These are the key messages that we have to amplify. I always find it stunning that in a country where Patrick Henry and his declaration, "Give me liberty or give me death," made him an American patriot, it's so difficult to understand and support the Palestinian call and struggle for freedom. It's just difficult to understand that disconnect. But obviously the distortions of our cause by Israeli propaganda, by the power of the Israeli lobby, have turned this into a hot button issue in the US rather than the peace and justice and equality issue that it is, as it is viewed almost everywhere else in the world. And we've seen this fueling unjust American policies, which just in this past year, as Dr. Jahshan referred to, included the Trump Declaration on Jerusalem, the embassy transfer, the termination of UNRWA funding, attempts to undermine Palestine refugee status and rights, the closure of the PLO office in DC, in addition to the hostility and humiliation routinely meted out against us under the guise of legislation in Congress, under AIPAC spells such as the Taylor Force Act or any other such legislation. So all of this has to be more firmly confronted, and I believe that doing so based on rights could provide most potential for change. I see legislation being promoted by Representative Betty McCollum, for example, on the rights of Palestinian children as an important model of such an approach that must be built upon. So in terms of, let's say, educating our own and others on our rights, for example, we have to establish as fact in the mainstream discourse that the Palestinian people have a right to self-determination and freedom. And this is non-negotiable in any context, even if it is said that negotiations are what will bring us to a solution. That is not negotiable. This people has to be free. The ICJ determined this in specific in its advisory opinion in 2004 for the Palestinian people to be a right. The self-determination is a right erga omnes, meaning owed to all people. There's not one people that can be excluded from this right. It also has to be established as fact that the right to return is not a claim. It's not a claim. It is an individual and collective right according to international law and to which all refugees are entitled. And for Palestine refugees, this right, affirmed in Resolution 194 in 1948, has been reaffirmed or recalled in more than 150 resolutions, practically constituting customary international law. And so this cannot simply be negated to fulfill Israel's wish of a Jewish majority, and must be seriously and humanely addressed in the context of any just solution. And the list goes on, including the prohibition on the acquisition of territory by force, which is universal. The Palestinian people have a right to their land and cannot be the exception. So framing our messaging clearly and consistently based on these rights and indisputable facts could help raise awareness, change perceptions, and open hearts and minds. And I would say that this rights and law-based approach has been central to our work at the United Nations on behalf of the Palestinian people. How else could a little Palestinian delegation effectively engage on the international stage to confront this illegal Israeli occupation, even as it is being fully backed by the world's superpower? Things are not looking up, this is true, but we are holding our own on the basis of international law and rights, which we will not forsake. So this approach was critical for us in addressing the situation of Jerusalem following President Trump's decision last December. And our efforts in that regard will be my main illustration of focusing on rights and the law. Despite all of our anger and dismay at the announcement, we did not retreat. We immediately mobilized, guided by the law. On the very same day of the announcement, just a few hours later, in official communications to the UN Security Council, the General Assembly, and Secretary General, we asserted our rights and reminded states of relevant resolutions and legal obligations and demanded international action to counter this unlawful decision. That letter, along with several other pieces of information, is in a packet that I've asked the conference to share as part of my presentation to illustrate this. Our appeal underscored the Security Council's long-standing determination of the illegality of, quote, all measures to change the demography, character, and status of Jerusalem. And this includes Israel's imposition of the Basic Law and attempts to annex the city, which the Council declared as flagrant violations of the Fourth Geneva Convention and having no legal validity. In Security Council Resolution 478 in 1980, the Council further directly called on those states that have established diplomatic missions at Jerusalem to withdraw such missions from the Holy City. And this was key. Yes, it is a resolution from 1980, but it remains valid. This was key to the position that we were able to carve out and maintain at the UN, but one that is being respected by the overwhelming majority of the international community, whereby actions by Israel and the US to the contrary cannot negate these resolutions or the law's applicability, and the majority of countries around the world, except for a few firebrands, like we see now with Brazil, the president-elect promising he's going to move his embassy, flirting with the idea of moving the embassy to Jerusalem or recognizing it as Israel's capital. But on the whole, other than Guatemala, one state out of 193 states in the world, one state mimicked the US, because we have been able to assert our position, not defensively, proactively, and say, when you violate that, you are in the wrong. You are unethical, you are immoral, and what you are doing is illegitimate. So aside from making that appeal, we also presented an official statement to the Security Council, stressing our rights, that the status of East Jerusalem is occupied, the illegality of all measures, and the illegitimacy of US recognition, and calling for respect of the historic status quo, protecting the Muslim and Christian holy sites. And these same principles and messages were then echoed by council members and capitals across the globe in a constant refrain, rejecting the US decision and calling for it to be rescinded. Immediately thereafter, again, based on rights and the law, we drafted a resolution to reaffirm those principles and UN legislation. And the Palestine delegation at the UN negotiated that resolution for 10 days, even though knowing that we would get a US veto. But the point was to consecrate the international consensus as withstanding the Trump attempts. And we got 14 out of 15 countries on the Security Council to vote in favor of that resolution. 14 countries representing the rest of the international community, with the exception of Israel and the US, which again vetoed the resolution. And we continued through to the General Assembly, et cetera, in asserting that position. Now, and we have an annual resolution, for example, on Jerusalem in the General Assembly, which will be adopted again this December. And a lot of people say, what is the point of all this repetition? These resolutions are not respected. They are safeguarding the rights of our people until the day that justice can be achieved. And so while these resolutions, for example, have not stopped the US from acting on their decision, their significance rests in the unequivocal reaffirmation of the law and international position on this matter, and denies both Israel and the United States the legitimacy and the recognition that they're looking for these illegal actions. So again, rather than being defensive, we need to be assertive and insistent, secure in the knowledge of our rights. The same way they hammer their propaganda and lies, we must hammer our truth and our facts. And this has been key for us at the United Nations in defending and upholding Palestinian rights. And for us, this legislation forms a first line of defense. Were it not for these resolutions, again, I would ask of you to consider what the situation and status of Jerusalem might be today at the hands of Israel. I mean, while undeniably bad, it would be far worse. So I believe that we don't have to keep framing and reframing our arguments in ad hoc ways to respond to each challenge. We don't need to keep reinventing the wheel. So whether you support 2 states or 1 state, a binational state, a confederation of states, the central pillar of our cause remains that we have inalienable rights and that the law, justice, is on our side. So I think that this too has often been lost in the anger and despair, typically characterizing our narratives and in the heated rhetorical debates on this issue. We have to refocus and unite, relying more consistently on the law and informed assistance on our rights and universal principles in our messaging and advocacy. And I think this is key in terms of our own outreach to others, but also in terms of educating our youth if we seek for them to carry forth this struggle for freedom. And that the law has not yet resulted in accountability doesn't mean that it ultimately won't. Time is not on our side, this is true, but the arc of justice is also very long, as Dr. Zoghbi pointed out. And so those who truly believe in the rule of law believe we will get there one day. And that thus our continuing conviction in the law and in the role, our role at the UN on behalf of the Palestinian people. But, and this is my last point, I would have to ask, what good is it if only we, a small circle of diplomats, academics, legalists, and activists know of these resolutions and of these rights? If it is not more broadly understood and utilized, their value is diminished. And so we have to work to inform and to amplify and mainstream those rights. And as diplomats, we can't be the implementers. So that role has to be pursued by others, the Palestinian leadership, civil society, including faith-based organizations, and popular activism must be coordinated and purposeful for real change to happen. And together we have to assert our rights, push back against the dehumanization of Palestinians by sharing the facts and stories of our people's suffering and dignity and their courage. And I think that the discussion that we had earlier about tourism and building those bridges and opening hearts and minds will be extremely important towards fostering understanding, support, and solidarity among world citizenry, including here in the US, that must then compel their governments to act on principle towards the Palestinian people and their rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have 15 minutes for Q&A. If you can make your questions succinct, your comments succinct, so we can have as many of them as we can. And let's start, please. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I agree fully with Dr. Zoghbi that we need an entirely new approach. Forget about establishing 2 states, work for civil, political, human rights for the Palestinians. And what that requires is a new type of leadership for the Palestinians, which adopts this as an objective and fights for it. And we need support from the outside for the Palestinians to achieve these rights, which are acknowledged universally, but somehow the Palestinians don't have them. So do you have any idea how to proceed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
With all due respect to the leadership in Ramallah, 47 years ago, I was doing my doctoral dissertation research. It was on what were called revitalization movements, how people under stress, how consciousness is transformed. And I was going to initially do it, because I'd been working with a guy at University of Pennsylvania, Anthony Wallace, with either Native Americans or African American movements in the 20s and 30s. And he said, no. He said, you really ought to deal with Palestinians. It's much more, nobody's working at that, and you really ought to do it. So I go off to Beirut, and I spend a whole bunch of time in the camps collecting people's stories, interviewing them according to the kind of questions that I wanted to, elicit from them. And the guy helping me set up the meetings was Ghassan Ganafani. And at one point, I went back to him, telling him what I was finding and what I was doing, and he said, you're in the wrong place. He said that you're looking for how pressure creates new consciousness. He said, in the camps, pressure has frozen old consciousness. People have romanticized the past. People have locked themselves into a value system that was the one that they brought with them. He said, the place where revolutionary consciousness, new thinking is coming, is with the people inside, as he called it. And so off I go to Tawfiq Zayed and Mahmoud Darwish and a whole bunch of other people, and I saw some really fascinating stuff happening. How this translates today to political decision-making in the entirety of Palestine is up to the people there to figure out. But I find some fascinating stuff being done by the Arabs inside. In the Palestinian citizens of Israel. I find the fact that no sooner had he just been elected to the Knesset than Ayman Oda is off to the Negev to lead a demonstration on behalf of people who their homes were being demolished. And then the next couple of days is up in Barim in the north, doing the same thing, demanding the right to return to their villages. And they had a general strike that actually was embraced by the people in the occupied territories, as well as the Arab community in Israel. I would hope that there'd be a convergence of the political energy coming from the Palestinians inside, the Israeli citizens, and their sophistication in political organizing with the people in the territories. And that, to me, would make some real sense. That said, I think that the roadmap for us here is laid out. When I started the Palestinian Human Rights Campaign back in the 70s, right? We were doing everything that needs to be done today. We were adopting cases, building coalitions. I mean, I look back sometimes at the stationery we had for the old PHRC, and we had everybody who'd been involved in the peace movement. Everybody, Pete Seeger, Don Luce, Dave Dellinger, Joan Baez. We had people, everybody except Andy Young, who was in Dr. King's circle. They'd all embraced us as part of our advisory board. And we lost that energy. We lost that energy. We need to recapture that. We need to build a movement not on the margins of the left, but with the mainstream of the left. And I think it's possible. Betty McCollum's legislation, I think you're right. It gives us a way forward. And when you focus not on the obscurities of politics, but on the concreteness of cases of human rights, you build broader support. It's tough to identify with where a border is or where a settlement goes or gets, which ones you get rid of. It's much easier to put a face on it and build a movement around it. And that's kind of where I think we need to go. Regardless of whatever outcome you get, the possibility of building a mass human rights movement here for Palestinians, humanizing them, building support for them, and creating a new political center around that issue, I think is very possible.
Great. Again, I encourage that our questions and our responses are a little short so that we can accommodate. Yes, Ambassador Mack.
Yes, I have a question for Ambassador Abdelhadi Nasser, and I would like a comment on it from an American activist point of view from either Jim or Khalil. A lot of us belong to organizations that want to support Palestinians but are worried about being seen as trying to delegitimize Israel. And it comes down to the question often of BDS and whether we should adopt the kind of BDS that some of the European countries have done, which in effect makes it impossible, would make it impossible for our officials and our members to visit Israel and the occupied territories. What is your view of this? What kind of advice do you have for us?
Thank you, Ambassador Mack, for that question. So I would simply say that there are many tools that one can avail themselves of in civil society or as an activist to support Palestinian rights. And the BDS movement is one tool. It is one mechanism. And it is one that can create a lot of pressure. But it may not be the tool of choice for everyone. And so at the risk of being repetitive, I would say focusing on rights, focusing on the law is central to the kind of work and the kind of support that you want to give. And insisting that your support for the human rights of the Palestinian people, the right of the Palestinian people to be independent, to live in freedom and dignity in their own homeland, that you reject its equation with anti-Semitism or anti-Israeli. And asking your counterparts, is this a zero-sum game? In order to be, pro-Israeli, I have to be anti-Palestinian? What about the human rights of all people and the right of these people to live freely and to coexist? And so again, just to go back to the BDS, it's a tool. It's not for everyone. But those who choose to use it can, and those who choose to raise awareness and to mobilize in a different way can choose different means.
I did a few. The BDS, in a way, all these types of movements are in the eye of the beholder. The problem we have made is we have allowed Israel and its supporters in this country to redefine the issue kind of to their own liking, mixing on purpose in order to delegitimize, if you will, legitimate support for the Palestinians. So somehow, any BDS type of talk in terms of boycotting, let's say, the product of the settlements. As an American, I should be free enough in this country, even though some are trying to shut me up, to be able to say, I am against something that is anti-American to start with. I am against occupation. I don't want to buy products from an occupation. We have to be a little bit more sensitive in order to minimize that criticism in terms of, are you boycotting Israel or because the accusation is any type of boycott of settlements is boycotting Israel. Well, that's their problem, not my problem. I distinguish, and we should be able, the position is defensible on an American basis. And we just have been intimidated, just like the double-edged sword of anti-Semitism. They use the double-edged sword in terms of the BDS movement to intimidate some of us against getting involved in this.
Marwan. Thank you for the speakers for the presentation. I have a question for everybody. I was in Palestine this past summer, and one of the goals of my visit was to invite Palestinian companies to do trade in the U.S., to invite them to our Al-Quds Festival and to the Palestine Trade Show, which is going to be next weekend, to present their products and services. And the two main complaints were we can't get visas and we cannot ship outside of Palestine, not even to Jordan, because Israel blocks products that in competition with their products from Palestine. So do you see any hope that the US administration can loosen up these rules from Israel and the Palestinians? And my second question to the ambassador, the new elect Brazilian new president is vowing to move the embassy to Jerusalem also. What's up with that, and do you have any strategy to stop it? Thank you.
Could I take the first part? And then we'll go. You know, when I was doing Builders for Peace with Vice President Gore, that was the biggest issue we faced. Our objective was to grow the economy in the West Bank and Gaza. Israel would not allow egress and you know, access and egress to the territories. And so people who were going to set up a factory in Gaza needed to import raw material and export the finished product, et cetera. They couldn't get guarantees of that. And so, as I used to put it, the horses were lined up at the gate and the gate never opened, and so the companies just fell off. I think we blew it back then because we knew what the problem was, and we would continually raise it with the Israelis, but we didn't organize the American business community around it. And I would suggest that your business council raise it with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, raise it with like companies that are doing business there that want to come here, prospective business people here, and raise it not as a political issue, but raise it as a business issue. We want to do business. They're not letting us do business. I mean, that's where the human rights effort with PHRC worked. We never got into the politics of it. We built the base of support, and the broader it grew was dependent upon the narrower the issue focused. Palestinians want the ability to do business. They need to import and export. You want to do business. They'd like to do business with you. Israel won't let them. Have that be the issue. And I'd be happy to meet with you afterwards and discuss it and see if we can develop a community-wide strategy on that. I think that that would make a lot of sense to a whole lot of people.
And just a little addition to that, I would say your strongest ally on this most probably would be Israeli businessmen. Their lobby is much more liberal on the Palestinian issue because they're motivated totally by profit. They will support that type of stuff, and you have to think of a role also for the Palestinians inside Israel. They're not subject to the same limitations. They can partner with Palestinian businesses in Palestine and work together.
I just quickly want to take it, just a slight issue with that. We found that the worst people to work with the Israeli business community because for them it was 1 or 2% of their market. They weren't willing to give it up. I mean, we had a fight like hell, for example, for Zahi Khoury to get the Coca-Cola franchise because Uzi Wertheimer wasn't going to give it up. And it was a very small piece of his market, but he wasn't going to give it up. It was the same with Burger King, the same with a whole lot of folks. I mean, the reason why Israel keeps this as a captive market and the business community support it is because it's a tiny fraction of their market, but they don't want to give it up. And so I would think that I'd focus on the American business community, and I think you're right. Partnerships with the Palestinians inside may be an interesting way around it, but I wouldn't lose sight of the fact that it's an organizing issue that would help bring you to the American business community in a way that might find some support that you didn't think you'd get.
Okay, we have only 2 minutes instead. 2 minutes for 3 more questioners. So if the ambassador can respond to the Brazil issue.
Yeah. Just very quickly, it's the same strategy that we've used with regard to the American position, and that is to reaffirm the international position, the rights position, to isolate the Brazilian position. But beyond that, that we will mobilize further in terms of legal consequences. So not just a backlash against states that would violate international law and dismiss it, but actually seeking legal remedies. And at the same time with Brazil, although his position, I'm going to move the embassy, I'm going to vote for Israel in the UN, is deeply worrying, he would have to do this through the Congress in Brasilia. So we are hoping that somehow the sanity will prevail in Brazil, because it is not just about Brazil and Palestine, it is also about their relationship with the rest of Latin America, but the rest of the world. And I think that some states would be hesitant to be seen as non-law abiding states. And so you have to work on that perception and mobilize on that basis.
Okay, please.
I had 2 questions, but maybe you could let me know which one of the 2.
No, just ask and
okay.
respond to one.
One of them, Mr. Khalil Jashan. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it.
No, you did well, better than my mother. Go ahead.
Okay. You mentioned the Palestinian leadership and the public opinion are different, and that you hope to touch on that during the Q&A. I was interested in hearing. My second question was, as you guys shared, if the resilient and steadfast people of Palestine are losing hope and conviction, and you say people from the inside are the ones who can help, how can we help them? What ideas do you have for us? Can we use social media in any way? Maybe you've touched on that already, but those are my two questions.
Okay, let's keep the answers short, please.
The losing hope. In every poll we do of Palestinians in the territories, we're finding that the hope is today, in the most recent one that we finished, 50% said they don't believe peace is even possible. 25% think 2 states, 25% 1 state. It was kind of even, surprisingly, but 50% said they didn't think it was possible, which is up 10 points from last year, when it was about 41% thought that no peace was possible. And so people are basically, especially in the West Bank, Gaza is a different setting because of the priorities and the needs. But in the West Bank, people are saying, I just want to get on with my life. I mean, I think that there's an energy that's been sucked out of them. Yeah. Fatigued, exactly. And so leadership has to come from elsewhere. And that's why I think that inside the folks, the Palestinian citizens in Israel, have a kind of an energy and a dynamic. And in East Jerusalem, there's also that same kind of energy and dynamic. Those are two places that are different, I think, than what's going on in several parts of the West Bank, where people have just, you know, they're just trying to figure out, how do I just get by the next week? And that's not a recipe for a mobilized constituency. So I think you're right, we can offer something, but the kind of thing we were talking about with the chamber is one thing I think that can be really helpful to energize folks.
Thank you, I'll be quick.
Yes,
clearly.
Sorry, 1 second, please.
Sure.
Yeah, let me respond very quickly, because this is a long, complicated topic. But I'm looking at the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research. Their last survey conducted in Palestine was number 69. You can look at it on their website. Basically, some of the issues, I'll leave it up to you to see where the discrepancy is. But let me tell you what the Palestinian public think. Right now, as we speak, both Fatah and Hamas have lost popular support among the Palestinians. You can see the numbers in the survey. 60%, 63% actually, of the Palestinian people demand the resignation of President Abbas. About basically half, 50% of the Palestinian public view the PA as having become a burden on the Palestinian people. 3/4 view conditions today as worse in the occupied territories, particularly in the West Bank, as those prevailing before the Oslo Accord. So they haven't seen that peace dividend at all compared to the businessmen that went so early in that. In terms of 90% of the Palestinians today view the Trump administration as biased in favor of Israel. So there might be some similarities with the current position of the leadership, although that position can change in 5 minutes should there be a serious, because remember, cutting relations with the U.S. is conditional by the Palestinian government. If Trump retracts his positions on Jerusalem and on refugees and on settlements, we'll go back and talk to him. The people don't want to talk to him. This is the same thing with UNRWA and et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. Clearly, the U.S. cannot play the role of even-handed mediator in this conflict. There have been references to the important role of civil society and the churches, but what other countries do the panelists think could come up and an individual country, a group of countries, and assume the role of a mediator that would advance the process towards peace and resolution?
Thank you.
No one's going to step into that role, and I don't think any group of nations will step into that role. But I do think that there are initiatives underway. In particular, I am so excited about what they're doing in Ireland right now, with basically a bill in the Senate to have Ireland lead the way on boycotting Israeli products. It passed once, it needs to pass once more, and then it goes to the House, and hopefully it'll be signed into law. Now, it's one little country, Ireland, but remember, Ireland is the country in Europe that broke with the EU and did the first boycott of South African products that ultimately led the way in the EU. I think Ireland goes first, maybe Belgium second, you'd see Spain fall in line, and you'd begin to see a domino effect in Europe. And I think that would be, now can the EU then replace, see, I think that that's part of the old dynamic, is to see somebody as leading the peace process. There is no peace process. And I don't think there's going to be one, because I don't think there will ever be an Israeli government in the next 20, 30 years that will be in a position where they can make an accommodation for peace. What you have is an internal struggle within the territories, Jordan to the Mediterranean, the struggle for equal rights, justice, and human rights. That's where the struggle is. That's the nature of the struggle. That doesn't need anybody to lead a negotiating process. It's a very different approach. And I sure hope that the ICC acts. It'll make a judgment that will not be honored by Israel, but it continues that effort that the PA has continued to do, which is to increasingly isolate Israel in the world community. And when you lead the Bloc of 77, and you're not even a formal country, but you're recognized by the UN and by the Bloc, that's huge in terms of isolating Israel.
Yeah,
and that's what needs to happen.
Sorry, and the G77 is actually now one.
No, hold it, sir. Sir, hold it, please. We don't have time. Yes, please, last.
Right, thank you. All right, first of all, Jim, I agree with you, and I observed for a long time that Palestinian citizens of Israel have a very special and unique role. And also, I have a friend who's doing her dissertation on that at George Mason School for Conflict Analysis and Resolution.
It'll be 10 times better than mine.
All right, well, I'll connect you with her. But I also just want to make an announcement that December 10th is the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. December 9th is the 70th anniversary of the Convention on Genocide. And this is very powerful. I've seen many events over the decades of youth, like young kids saying, how come I never knew about this? And adults, people around I've shared this with, and people have used it really as an awakening and as a emboldening. So, perhaps you can do events or, just spread it on the web for December 10th.
Like the right wing here latches on to Article 2 of the Constitution, right? The Second Amendment, rather, and they pared down the Bill of Rights to a couple that they like. The rest of them they don't like. The same with the right wing on the Universal Declaration. I mean, they founded institutions on Article 18, the religious freedom one. So when I was sitting as a member of the commission, when I was a commissioner on international religious freedom, and I would bring to them the articles of that declaration that dealt with the right of people to return to their homes, or the right of people not to be discriminated based on their faith or ethnicity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, within that body of law, not law, but of accepted covenant that was passed by most nations in the world, there are so many rights. You're right. People need to know what they are, and they don't know them. They don't know what the Geneva Conventions are. They don't know what the Universal Declaration is. We need to be elevating those, and I think that's what these guys are doing at the UN, and it's really significant.
Okay. If I could just say,
thank you very much. I'm going to ask the ambassador and Dr. Zumbi and so on, and Khalil, 1 minute each, and we're done.
Okay, so just on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it is amplified constantly in our work, as are the Charter rights. After 70 years, these are international norms, and coincidentally enough, this, as November 29th, it has been long declared by the UN, the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. This year, our theme is 70 years of the UN Declaration, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, 70 years of the Palestinian Nakba, to show the disconnect. These are our rights. This is what has happened in Palestine. How do we close that gap? But again, it's about raising awareness. These are universal rights. Why are the Palestinian people deprived of those rights? And speaking on that basis.
Great. Khalil, one last minute.
You get mine, you get two.
Okay. I just want to re-emphasize the point I made in terms of the discrepancy between the ruler and the ruled in the Arab world, and this is not, Palestine is not an exception to that. Last week, just a few days ago actually, the Palestine Central Council met. I know it was probably a symbolic meeting more than a substantive one, but they took some substantive decisions. However, the decisions, as substantive as they were left to the mercy of the president to implement. And I hope that particularly the issue of rejecting the deal of the century, continuing to boycott the administration until it rescinds its decisions, supporting international peace conference with bringing in new countries and new sponsors to that, focusing totally on ending Israeli occupation, and basically suspending recognition of the State of Israel for the first time. I hope that the President of Palestine takes these recommendations seriously and implements them in full. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all very, very much for being on the panel. I promise, I know some of you have to go to certain other locations and meetings and so on. I promise we'll be done in exactly 5 minutes. I would like to thank the organizers, the planning committee, the panelists, the moderators, all participants. This is tremendous. And as promised earlier in the conference, we came together to a consensus, and this is only for your consideration, with a statement about Together in Faith, Jerusalem, our collective home. So we have with you, we just distributed to you, a statement that in a way embodies what we have discussed during this conference, and the issue of this thinking of rights is very much embedded in this statement. So let me just go very quickly over it. We don't need to take any vote at this point. We just want to put it in your good hands, and then you can send comments to Sir Ratib, and then we take it from there. Jerusalem is a city like no other, nestled deep in the heart of free Abrahamic faith traditions. She carries a special weight in our varied but interrelated beliefs and images of reality. Although these sometimes become entangled with our political goals, it is clear now more than ever that Jerusalem's significance resides in embracing humanity and inclusive relations. Therefore, Jerusalem cannot belong exclusively or even predominantly to one people or one religion. The inhabitants of Jerusalem must have a dignified life and have equal access to housing, jobs, education, medical care, municipal services, political participation, cultural activities, and religious sites. Legal protection is essential. All inhabitants of Jerusalem must be equal before the law. Christians, Muslims, Jews, and others everywhere are urged to advocate for preserving Jerusalem's status quo and for maintaining her as the inclusive center of faith. An answer to the question of Jerusalem must be arrived at through negotiations, not dictation, through fairness, not partiality. Both the process and its outcome must be just and inclusive. Only when Jerusalem is at peace can it fulfill her true universal character and be the center of reconciliation for humanity. We commit ourselves to bringing together religious leaders and peace organizations in support of our collective home, Jerusalem, and to do so in an organized, systematic, and systemic manner. Thank you very much. All the best.
Fantastic presentation. This is from Jewish Voices for Peace, Cory Booker's